Oh, you know what I love?
Sports.
Love sports.
Sports.
When it comes to
Texas A&M.
Where are you getting this information?
Let me tell you.
Welcome to TexAgs.
I need to talk a little sports with you, Ags. David Nuno here with TexAgs Radio. Billy Lucci here on TexAgs Radio. Olin Buchanan.
We will develop men, we will graduate players, and we will win championships on the field.
The best way for us to win is to do it together.
Do you realize everybody knows who you are right now?
Very thankful for 12th man. They've won us games.
Been in college baseball for a while now, but I've never experienced anything like 12th man.
That's about as pretty a throw-catch combo as there is.
I saw the safety roll, the slot fade. I knew where I needed to put the ball.
Our skill set worked great together. Like, he was more speed and I was more power, and then we put together, it was like thunder and lightning, you know.
You know, if I'm betting on anybody, it's the Aggies.
It's a summer show special on TexAgs Radio today, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Nick Savage here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and it is the Go Hour presented by the Warehouse at CC Creations. Maroon never looks so good with Maroon U. Again, filling in for David Nuno. He's out the rest of the week. One more show this week, and we'll have Luke Evangelos and Matthew Dawson in the host chairs tomorrow. But I'm with you today, and as I mentioned, summer show special. No David, no OB, no Bronny, and no Billy today. You're just stuck with, as Carson Stein put it, the boys today. So we hope you stick around, and we hope we're entertaining for you. But I'll give you a quick rundown of what we got on the show today, episode 3,328 of TexAgs Radio. The first couple segments will just be me, Carson, and Luke. We're going to ponder over some, some college football talk, look at some new teams and new conferences, and what team might have the best chance of winning the new conference. At 8:35, we'll welcome in former Texas A&M quarterback Stephen McGee for a couple segments. At 9 o'clock, we'll go out to the Boss Firearms hotline and talk to Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC, just kind of preview media days. Same kind of topics for most of our guests today. Aaron Torres at 9:35, we'll talk a little bit about everything. And at 10:35, we'll hear from Caroline Fenton of Yahoo Sports. She changed up her gig, and we'll hear what she's been up to and get her thoughts on SEC football and all that good stuff. But for now, I'll welcome in the team a little bit earlier than we normally do. Behind the glass, we got Luke Evangelos, and over at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center, we have Carson Stein. Luke, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Nick.
Yeah, you gotta just hit 2 to unmute your mic.
Yes, we did that. And you know what? It was only half a second late, so we can just forget that happened.
Yep.
Happy 7-Eleven Day to all those who celebrate. Make sure to go get your free Slurpee. I don't know if they still do that. I remember I went last year, and they were pretty much out by the middle of the day. But if you go early enough, like right now, you could probably get a free Slurpee.
Do we really want a Slurpee at 8:03 a.m. in the morning?
Yes. What's wrong with that?
Richard says yes. So
Richard says yes. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of sugar to start your day. We got people like OB putting 200 milligrams of caffeine in his body with a bang to start the day. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of sugar.
Well, Carson Stein over at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center, you have a bang, right? Or is that what is that? What do you got today?
It's a ghost.
Oh, okay. Looks disgusting. How are you,
it's
sir?
So good. Good. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm great. Happy to have y'all with me here on the first couple segments. Show topic I wanted to get into with both of you, and if you're listening in, please feel free to text in 979-693-1150. If you're watching on YouTube, chat it, or if you're on the TexAgs live stream, chat it down in the chat below. Which teams in a new conference do you think has the best chance to win that conference? And we're going to go through, I guess, the big four and kind of talk our way through it here. So, and I have them listed out because I had to go find which teams were joining which conference because the realignment is crazy. And I'm not Matthew Dawson. We're not going to go the MAC route or the Sun Belt route. That's for tomorrow. Tune into tomorrow's show if you want to, hear projected win totals and total points will be scored on the season from Toledo, if that interests you. But for the Power Four conferences, boys, let's start with the ACC. New teams, SMU, Cal, and Stanford. And I'll start here. I think there's pretty much a 0% chance either of those teams win the conference with Florida State or Clemson in it. The past 12 of the last 13 years, one of those two teams has won the ACC. So I guess the best team out of those three has to be SMU. Me and Carson were just talking about it. But, like, I mean, do they have a chance to compete with Florida State and Clemson? I don't think so. Especially Cal and Stanford don't. So, Luke, what's your take on that?
You know, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. I think people are sleeping on SMU a little bit. Cal and Stanford, no doubt in my mind, both of those teams are going to be fighting to win probably 3 games total combined.
For sure.
Those two teams are stinkers. They're there for their academics and other sports. But SMU had a sneaky good 11-3 season last year. They bring back their quarterback, Preston Stone, Rhett Lashley. People thought SMU was, down in the dumps after their coach left them for TCU. But SMU, I think, is a sleeper and a very good team. Matthew, like you were talking about, the projected win totals that will go over tomorrow, SMU is right up at the top with the likes of Clemson, Florida State, NC State. So if I had to pick one new team in the ACC to win the conference, I would pick SMU, but I wouldn't feel like it's a pity vote. I think SMU genuinely has a chance to win the conference.
Okay. They do play Florida State, which is their biggest test. Their biggest stretch in the middle of the season is versus TCU, versus Florida State, at Louisville, at Stanford, at Duke. So 3 straight road games, but Stanford mixed in there. That should be a win for them. But I don't know about that. I don't know why I don't see them winning more than 9 games, in my opinion. Carson, what's your take on those 3 teams joining the ACC? Either of them have a chance to win it?
I'm with Luke. I think SMU is the sleeper team of the league so far. I mean, you were just going over a few games of the schedule, but if you look at their schedule, it's really favorable. Like, they could make a serious run when it comes to the late games, such as, like you said, finish off with Duke, then you go at home against Pittsburgh, home against Boston College, at Virginia, at California. That could be, I legitimately see around 10 wins.
Definitely could finish that stretch 4-0, but I think it's that middle part that's really going to knock them out of conference championship contention. So, again, whenever we get to y'all's pick for like, hey, this one is the best chance, let me know, because I'll let you know when we get to my pick. We'll go to the Big Ten now. Oregon, USC, Washington, UCLA are the new teams there. The obvious pick out of those, I think, would be Oregon. The Ducks were ranked second nationally in points per game, total offense per game, passing yards per game, and overall offensive yards on the season last year. So they return a lot of those, offensive weapons. Evan Stewart, we know, has transferred up there. Dylan Gabriel, transfer quarterback in. Their offensive coordinator, Will Stein, it'll be his second season up there. So good amount of talent on offense. But my question for them is going to be, I guess it's a question for every team that changes conferences, but will they be able to adjust to, the style of play? Or will the Big Ten have to adjust to how they play, offensive football first, that kind. So, Luke, what are your thoughts? Any of those 4 teams stand out to you?
Definitely Oregon is the obvious favorite. Just looking at their schedule, though, it's a lot tougher. There are definitely some tough games in there, but they get Boise State at home. Boise State, to me, is a team that I think has a chance to earn that Group of 5 spot. Boise State brought in a lot of great players. They've got Malachi Nelson, Chris Marshall. I think they're going to win the Mountain West, and they're going to be a really tough team for Oregon to play. But luckily, they get them at home. They also get Ohio State at home. For me, the tricky game is going at Michigan and at Wisconsin, really, to end their season. So a little bit of a tough schedule to start the year, but it gets a little bit easier down the stretch. So for me, Oregon is that team to watch. I think immediately in the Big Ten, it's Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon. No disrespect to Michigan, which is a team that I know Richard and I love watching, but they just lost a lot of people. You're gonna see their defense carry them.
They lost everybody, bro. They lost their coach. How much turnover was there on their entire coaching staff? I'm a little ignorant on that. Did they have to roll in did they change everything up? Did they have a lot of people stick around, or is it like a whole new squad in there?
I'm not sure about the specific position coaches, but I can tell you that Sharon Moore, who was kind of the glue to that coaching staff and keeping the team together when Harbaugh was suspended, is now not just their interim head coach, but now their full-time head coach. Very, very player-oriented and a player's coach that the team loves. So You would think they can keep it together. My big question for them is on offense, though. And when you bring in teams like Oregon, USC, UCLA, Washington, who are from the Pac-12 and are notorious for having high-flying offenses, you know Michigan's defense is going to step up, but will Michigan's offense be able to match that? So obviously they just came off a national championship, but for me, Michigan is not really a team that I'm looking for in the Big Ten that I would put money on to win the conference right now.
Carson, your thoughts on the Big Ten? Any of those 4 new teams? Surprisingly, no one's mentioned Washington yet, but as we all know, coach leaves. Their all-star quarterback is gone. I don't know what's left up there, but Carson, again, any of those 4 teams stick out to you?
I feel like I'm, again, agreeing with Luke. I feel like it's obvious that Oregon's the pick here. They have the best talent right now out of those 4 teams coming to the Big Ten. Their schedule's more favorable than others. Like, I'm looking at USC's schedule. I don't think they'll win more than 7 games this year. USC has to play LSU, Michigan, Penn State. Like,
man, what happens if USC wins 7 games? What happens to Lincoln Riley? What's the conversation around him?
He's probably just going to overcook another brisket.
Seat gets a little warm.
Most likely. So we're all in agreement there, Oregon. I still don't think they are the best bet for a new team and a new conference to win it. That comes in the Big 12 for me personally. Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State all join the Big 12 conference this year. And I think Utah, out of all 4 Power 4 conferences, Utah has the best chance to win their new conference just because I don't think, with everything left, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, those are the 2 biggest, roadblocks, in my opinion, in the Big 12 for the Utes. But let me get to my notes here. Yeah, I think Utah, day one from entering the conference, is the best team there. And by many outlets, highest projected win total. Sorry to steal a little thunder there from you, Matthew. Toughest tests on their schedules. They go to Oklahoma State week 4. They play at Colorado November 16th and at UCF November 29th. Those 3 games are really going to, I think, determine what happens to them. And I think they'll be favored in all 3 of those games. And as of April 2024, they have 16 returning starters. That might have changed again with transfer portal stuff and all that good stuff. But 6 offensive players, including Cam Rising, coming back. So my pick for all the new teams and new conferences, I think Utah has the best chance to win the conference. Luke?
I feel like we're not being controversial enough right now, but I am going to have to agree with you. Sorry, we're all on the same wavelength here.
We did not talk about this pre-show.
We did
either.
not, but
this
it's
was
just
not planned.
It's just so obvious. I'm not saying Utah. If I had to pick Utah or Oregon, who's a better team? I think Oregon is a better team, but the Big Ten is significantly tougher. Any team that comes into the Big 12 and shows like any sign of life, I think, or any pulse, is going to immediately be a favorite, and that's Utah for me. The teams they're coming in with, again, Colorado, we don't need to discuss.
Oh, we
my
will.
feelings.
We'll talk a little bit about what was said at Big 12 Media Days yesterday. I know Carson wanted to touch on that, but continue, Luke.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we do not like Colorado around here. I think just the whole hype around them, they won 4 games last year. I'd be surprised if they won 4 again. Arizona and Arizona State are trending upwards, but they've lost a lot of pieces, a lot of coaching changes. So for me, it's Utah is the obvious answer. Cam Rising, I was actually doing a little bit of research because I know he's old, but I did not know that he's older than Trevor Lawrence, who has played 3 years in the NFL. Remember, Cam Rising started his career at Texas. A lot of red shirts, a lot of COVID years, a lot of injury years. He didn't play at all last season, so Cam Rising is coming back. A lot of experienced pieces on that team, but when you look at coming into a new conference, a different style of play than they're used to from the Pac-12, what's going to translate the most, and that's going to be quarterback play. And when you have someone who's been playing quarterback longer than like most of us have been working at TexAgs, that's probably a pretty good sign for your team.
Carson, your thoughts on the Big 12?
So, yes, Utah is the favorite. Utah's probably going to win the thing. I have a sleeper team, and I think Arizona can make some real noise in the Big 12. They returned their quarterback and the star receiver that lit up the country last year. And I know a lot of coaching changed, a lot of players leaving, a lot of players coming in and out. I really think Arizona can make some noise when it comes to the Big 12.
Okay, and then we'll get to our last conference here, which is the Southeastern Conference, Texas and OU. out of those two teams, I think, again, I believe we'll probably be all in agreement here, but I think Texas has the best chance out of those two teams to win the conference. Everyone saw their dress rehearsal last season in Tuscaloosa. Everyone jumped on it and said, hey, they're ready. They're SEC ready. But as Billy has said, as pretty much all the talking heads have said, can they withstand the week in and week out grind, right? Bronny was touching on this yesterday. Like, it's not the big game against Georgia. It's the next week when they go play, at Vanderbilt, then at Kentucky, then I don't have their schedule in front of me, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's just the wear and tear of the SEC is different than the Big 12. So will they be able to, sustain that? I don't think so. I think there's going to be a little bit of a growing period for both those teams. I still think they're going to be, upwards of 8+ wins, but, again, can they withstand it? So that's why I don't think they have the best chance to win their new conference. Luke?
I think the answer is Texas, but I think a lot of that has to do with their schedule. No doubt both teams are talented, but I think if you gave Texas Oklahoma's schedule and gave Oklahoma Texas's schedule, I think these two teams are leaving this year with a pretty similar record. I mean, just looking at Oklahoma's schedule, first of all, in the non-conference, they have to play Tulane, who is going to be right in that conversation as one of the better group of 5 teams. They play Tennessee, Auburn. Oklahoma then has to play Ole Miss, Missouri, Alabama, LSU to end their season. And Texas, it's been pretty well documented that their schedule is not exactly the toughest in year one in the SEC. And Oklahoma's having to play all the major programs and all the blue bloods in the SEC. So if Oklahoma had a better schedule, I would probably say they're the trendier pick. But at this point, it's going to be Texas, fresh off a college football playoff appearance with a really favorable schedule.
Okay. Carson?
I mean, we're real controversial radio here today, but it's
all right. We don't
it's
need to
obviously Texas. They got an easy schedule. They got one of the easiest schedules in the SEC. Their hardest back-to-back week is Oklahoma, or the Cotton Bowl, against Oklahoma, and then hosting Georgia in back-to-back weeks. That's the toughest part of their schedule. They got a lot of returners on defense and offense. I'm just worried about when it comes to the production, such as wide receiver and running back. They lost all of their major production last year. I know that's a big question, but out of those two teams, yeah, Texas is the favorite too. Out of those two teams to make the playoffs and win the conference.
So I gave my pick. I said Utah, out of all the new teams moving conferences, has the best chance to win it. What are y'all's picks out of all the teams moving?
I mean, Utah. It's just like I said earlier. I think Oregon is a better team. If I had to pick one or two teams who are the best moving conferences, it's definitely Texas and Oregon. But just simply for the fact that the Big 12. It has not always been the strongest conference, but now you take away 2 of the best programs from it. Now it's a cupcake all around. So I'm going to have to go Utah just by the fact that they're really not playing quality teams week in and week out.
Carson, what's your pick?
I'm going to go with a little bit of a hot take here. I'm going to go Oregon.
Okay.
I think Oregon has...
I think they would... Sorry, go ahead.
They have a veteran when it comes to Dylan Gabriel. They got a lot of guys in the transfer portal. Dan Lanning's been recruiting a monster out there in Oregon. And I think if you look at them matched up with some of the Big Ten teams, the only matchup they really have to worry about, to me, is Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And I think other than that, I think it's Oregon's league to win.
Yeah, if we were doing a rankings of this, I'd go Utah, Oregon, then I'd probably go Texas.
And then you'd probably go
3.
Colorado.
Then I'd go Colorado, yeah, absolutely. By the way, this is Coffee Talk presented by TexAgs Coffee. Beat the hell out of morning by going to TexAgsCoffee.com. I see y'all chatting in on the YouTube page. Todd Roper says Arizona has the best chance to win. Like Carson mentioned, possible, but I don't see that happening. Good topic. The conference realignment is crazy. Thanks, Chad Clark. We all agree here. Any closing thoughts on this topic, guys, before we hit a quick break and get to the other side?
No, I just want to say that was a great topic.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll hit a break here. On the other side, we'll talk about, Aggie baseball picked up another transfer. It just keeps rolling for Mike Early and the crew over there at Bluebell Park. I'll kind of preview SEC Media Days a little bit, kind of talk about what y'all can expect from, content perspective. And, it's a crazy time. It'll be fun up in Dallas, so don't go anywhere. Keep it right here. You're listening to TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Great pick for bumper music there, Emily. The boys are running the show today. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner Jewelers. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and it is the Go Hour presented by the Warehouse at CC Creations. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno. Got Carson Stein over at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center and have Luke Evangelist directing the show, doing my usual job. Gentlemen, before we get to Stephen McGee in the next segment, kind of wanted to touch on another transfer commit for Texas A&M baseball. Connor Bear Harrison, a 6'3", 210-pound catcher out of St. Mary's, who was the 2024 West Coast Conference, or was on the 2024 West Coast Conference all-freshman team, committed to transfer here to A&M. He hit .322, had 8 home runs and 36 RBIs in 47 games. This is from Bronny's tweet about Harrison. Huge power potential to add to an already impressive lineup for Michael Early in his first year. And Billy also added on Twitter, St. Mary's catcher adding even more pop to a loaded A&M roster and rounds out what will be a complete turnover at an important position. And if you think about it, that made me think, like, man, that's very true, because you go Max Coffer, Jackson Appel, and Hank Barr this year, turnover to Jacob Galloway from USC. You got Harrison transferring in from St. Mary's. And you also had Hayden Kreitz, an incoming freshman this season as well. So, gentlemen, your thoughts on the newest pickup for Michael Early and the crew? Luke, you go ahead first.
Well, anytime someone has the nickname Bear, it's probably not given lightly, and it's for good reason. And after watching his highlights, he definitely deserves it. In high school, just doing some background research on this kid, he was the California Sports Player of the Year, the Bay Area News Player of the Year, West Coast Preps Baseball Athlete of the Year, first team Max Preps California All-State, and a second team Max Preps All-American. So, in a state as rich with talent as California, they don't just give those awards to anybody. Like Gavin Grahovic, Hayden Schott, a lot of A&M's lineup, Ali Camarillo is from California. And so for a player like that to win all those awards and pretty much be the unanimous player of the year in their state, it's obviously a great sign. And again, like you said, adding a ton of depth at a position that is uber important.
And I don't want to forget, hold on real quick there, Carson. Don't want to forget Jamal George, who committed a few days ago. That guy can play anywhere. He can even catch if needed. I would imagine that's not going to be his primary role, but again, you got 4 catchers on the roster next year who are more than capable of stepping into that role. Carson?
This guy, like Luke was saying, this guy's highlights are pretty good. Like, this guy can hit the ball. And whenever was it earlier this week, when I was doing social, we were doing how many home runs the team would combine for. Yeah. And that was with the USC catcher only having like 10. If this guy can hit 15 to 20 like it's projected right now, this team could finish with, projected right now, like 180 home runs, which would, I'd imagine, lead the nation.
Talking about baseball in July is fun, isn't it? You can pontificate over all those things. But yeah, another one in the boat for Michael Early and the crew over there. For Aggie baseball, Connor Bear Harrison commits out of the transfer portal. And before we get to McGee, kind of wanted to talk about what to expect from TexAgs coming up next week with SEC Media Days. So the whole crew's heading up to Dallas. Luke will be there, his first Media Days, and he's going to help me do what I absolutely I do not like doing it. I feel uncomfortable, but to get those, as many guests as we do on this program for y'all, you got to pester, man. You got to go and talk to people. You see Paul Feinbaum walking by, you got to go pester him. Hey, Paul, want to come on the show? And you got to do it over and over again. So, Luke, I'm glad you're coming with me to help me with that. Are you prepared to do that?
Yeah, definitely prepared. Richard reminds me.
You are a professional pesterer.
Yeah, Richard reminds me all the time about how annoying I am, how I never shut up, and I just never get out of his face. So I figured, why not use those skills on a professional level and see if we can't have that same effect on some ESPN and SEC media personalities and see if we can't get them on our show.
Is your strategy just to annoy them so much where they're just like, if I say yes, this kid will finally leave me alone?
That's definitely one of the tricks I have up my sleeve. I'm going to approach different people in different ways. So I've already kind of got a little rough playbook on what I'm going to do for different people. So that is certainly a strategy I have, but it's not going to be my main strategy.
I'm going to be interested to see that. So some of the guests that will be there, or I guess talent that will be there, Alyssa Lang, a lot of the similar names, but I'll touch on a few of the guys that are going to be there this year that weren't there last year. Dustin Dvorak, he wasn't there. So we'll look forward to sitting down with him. I don't think we got Dari Noka on the show last year during SEC Media Day, so we'll try to get him. Jordan Rogers, Benjamin Watson, Peter Burns, all of our good friends. Sam Acho was not there last year. I got to get him on the show. Randall Cobb, that'll be fun to sit down with him. So those are some people to look out for. I know we already got Tony Barnhart secured for Monday. I'm jumping on those press release emails as quick as I can to make less work for me and you, Luke, so we don't have to, track people down and do all that stuff. But just, is there a specific guest y'all are looking forward to most from hearing from?
Honestly, Richard just said your mom. Actually, so Richard, just real quick, my mom actually will be in Dallas, but she will not be at the event. So if you wanted to contact her, I'm sure there are other ways to do that, but she will actually not be at SEC Media Days. Thank you for that. Oh, he was saying Nick's mom. Okay. I don't know if Mrs. Savage will be in attendance. She won't. Yes. So maybe Nick and I's mom will be hanging out, but not per se at SEC Media Days. So again, Richard, thank you for that commentary from the back row. Very, very thankful for those comments as well. The middle row, sorry. Anyways, whatever. I would say, Sam Acho, I'm interested to see. I went to the same high school as him. Shout out to the very proud St. Mark's Lions alumni network over there. So it's interesting. You got a lot of media people coming from Texas and Oklahoma who you don't normally hear from. And I think Sam Acho offers a pretty interesting perspective from the Texas side. But also he knows the SEC and college football pretty well.
Carson, anyone you're looking forward to hearing from?
If we get Paul Feinbaum
on
the show.
Paul Feinbaum? Is that what you're about to say?
Maybe, who knows? So it's a little early still in the morning, and this energy drink's running through me right now. But yeah, Paul Feinbaum.
Huh? Anyways, continue.
Paul Feinbaum. If we get Paul Feinbaum on the show, top tier show.
That was my my big project last year. I think I had to go up to him about 4 different times, and he's a busy man. It's not like he was, telling me to shoo away. He was very nice about it all, and he eventually came and sat down. So we'll do that this year. We'll be sure to get y'all, all the guests and everyone you want to hear from, get all their opinions about A&M. I'll probably bring that up later on in the show with y'all too, just what we think the national perspective will be on A&M at SEC Media Days. But right now, let's hit a break. On the other side, we'll hear from former Texas A&M quarterback Stephen McGee. Keep it right here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back in. TexAgs Radio presented by David Garner's Jewelers. We're here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. It's the Go Hour presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno. And we're going to go out to the Boss Firearms hotline. Boss Firearms, your local experts. They buy used guns, ammo, and accessories. Go to bossfirearms.com to start earning money like a boss today. Former Texas A&M and Dallas Cowboys and Houston Texans quarterback Stephen McGee joins us. Mr. McGee, again, you're supposed to come into the studio. I have a thank you note for you.
Oh boy, yes. My apologies. I think we've already Zane's already gotten on to me about the same thing, so I'll be there in a couple of weeks after SEC Media Days. But today was not the day.
What's going on? You sound busy, stressed.
Well, Ms. Zane is always wanted to meet up with me, and so today, she, we had to have our breakfast meeting. You know how that is. So I couldn't come into TexAgs, right?
Yeah, I gotcha. Everyone's cracking up behind there. I can hear them laughing. But anyways,
are we too old to do your mama's jokes on
Richard
radio?
Richard already got one on me earlier, and my mom texted into the show. So I mean,
I'll be honest with you, I thought it was well played.
I mean, he's a wordsmith back there, so can't be mad at him. But Stephen, let's jump into it. We'll start with Connor Wigman. All right, just quarterback, talking about a quarterback. What do you see, or what do you hope to see out of Connor Wigman this year? Is there something that you've seen in the past, or like, man, if he works on this bit of his game, he's gonna go to another level, or what do you think he needs to work on the most there?
Honestly, I think outside of just the physical ability, I think the biggest thing for him is just proving to, certainly, I think the guys in the locker room love him and rally around him and work for him. But I think he's got to prove to the NFL teams that he can be the CEO, that they can pay him $40 million a year. And he can be the face of that franchise. And so I think it's taking on that leadership role and being the face of the program. Does the team feel like he elevates everyone around him to be better, right? And really embracing that leadership role. And it doesn't have to be the most outgoing personality. It just has to be this fire presence that he brings to the huddle, right? And I think that those characteristics of a great quarterback that necessarily don't show up on a stat line or aren't something that's visible on the screen all the time are the things that could really move the needle a lot for him, in my opinion. Now, I think outside of that, the obvious things are he's got to stay healthy, right? I mean, he's got to stay healthy for 12 games. If we're going to have a chance to win and have a good football team, he's got to be healthy. The second part is, I look at his game. He protects the football. He does a great job of that. But he's also not conservative, right? He'll take aggressive decisions downfield. I think his greatest strength is that quick release. He's accurate. And boy, when he decides to pull the trigger, the ball's out quick. He's decisive for a young guy. And that's always really, really impressed me. I'd say if you're critical of any part of his game, maybe it would be his deep ball, right? He doesn't have the strongest arm. That's just not his game, but he don't have to. I mean, let's think about one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, Drew Brees. Maybe he could throw the ball 40 yards, 42 yards. But boy, he was incredible. He was a magician with the football. And so I think just throwing a catchable deep ball is more important than having a cannon of an arm. But man, top to bottom, the guy's got a lot going for him. He's got an incredible skill set. And you guys know how big I've been on Connor since his first snap as a freshman. Now, all that to say, this is a prove-it year. He's got some good quarterbacks that he's going to be going up against in the SEC. He's got a good one down the road in Austin. And so this team's success will be on his back, right? We have enough missing pieces, unknowns, question marks, especially on the offensive side of the ball this year, where you have to have great quarterback play for this team to make a run.
Absolutely. So you mentioned if he stays healthy at the end of the season, he plays 12, 13 games, whatever. What do you think the perception of him will be nationally? And you mentioned NFL. Where do you think he might fall? Where's that potential in the draft?
Yeah, I think the NFL is going to want to see production, right, to go alongside with the skill set. But a lot of people always raise their eyebrows when I say I think that Connor Wigman has the potential to be a first-round pick. And I think he's one of the best to ever do it from an NFL perspective in college. So, we've had Ryan Tannehill, obviously a very talented guy. You have Johnny Manziel, who's one of the greatest college football players ever. But when you look at it from the lenses of what does an NFL scout want to see in a college quarterback, I'm not so sure we've had a better quarterback at A&M that could be a top-tier NFL prospect. But, man, the quick release and the accuracy, I think the accuracy under pressure, too, is what's so unique is, I remember a play going into the zone last year. He's backed up. He's on the left hash. Of course, college hashes are much wider than they are in the NFL. That's a long throw when you're throwing a 10-yard out to the field. It was man-to-man coverage. They brought a nickel Sam, free off the edge. That guy's unblocked, and he stands in and throws a dime out front with a guy draped all over man-to-man coverage all the way across the field from the left hash with a free blitzer in his face. Those type of throws are rare amongst the best of the best in the NFL. Like, that is an elite level caliber play. And those are the types of things that I think most people would just gloss over and not say, it's just another play. It's another completion. But, man, the ability to get the ball out under pressure and very accurately is what makes Connor so unique, in my opinion. And then when the lights come on, he really shines. You go out and watch him routes on air or 7-on-7, he's not going to light the world on fire. You're not going to leave practice thinking, my gosh, that's the next, Josh Allen or Pat Mahomes. I think when the lights come on is when he's really, really good.
I want to conclude that thought by just saying if Connor decides to go into the draft, he'd be able to come back for his senior year if he'd like to as well. Turning the page here to the rest of the offense, out of these three position groups, who do you think will be the most productive? Tight end, running backs, or wide receivers?
I think running backs. You got three really, really good ones. And boy, I hope for Connor's sake and for this offensive sake that they can really carry the load. I don't think there's any reason to believe that they won't. They've been really, really good. And obviously Ruben Owens has a lot of ability. And I think for each one of those guys is being more dependable when the ball is not in your hands. I think they all have the ability to make guys miss in the box, get extra yards after contact. All those things are great. But to me, the liability of a running back is when the ball is not in his hands, especially on third down, right? Can Ruben Owens be trusted on third down when we're getting pressure to block the right guy? Or is he going to get the quarterback blown up, right? That's where a head coach has to be able to put a guy in and say, I trust this guy to understand what is expected of him and what his responsibility is. But top to bottom, very talented position. And you'd have to think that that's the one that we lean most heavily on. Question mark still for me is offensive line. It's you got to see it. And, you'd have to think that with this new staff and all indications are, having some really, really good assistants, Colin Klein, a guy that everyone's big on. Other coaches that I've talked to in college football love him. They hate scheming against him. So that's exciting to me, and I'm hopeful that with that scheme, this offensive line takes the next step as well. But then also, figuring out pieces, guys getting a year older, more mature, throwing in some new talent. All those things are at least hopefully trending up, but still a question mark.
Stephen, let's hit a break here, and on the other side, we'll get into a few national talking points and all that good stuff. So don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back in. TexAgs Radio presented by David Garner Jewelers here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Last segment of the Go Hour presented by the warehouse at CC Creations. On the Boss Firearms Hotline, we got Stephen McGee. And McGee, as we close out this hour, you mentioned earlier there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that are impressive. So what are some of those names that you'll keep an eye on throughout the season coming up?
Well, I'm curious to see how Quinn Ewers does. I think he's one that's definitely, up there and a guy that's, I think, elevated the play of Texas for the last couple of years. And I think been a missing link for them for quite some time as having one of those elite play callers. I can't say that he's my favorite cup of tea, but Sanders up at Colorado, I want to see how they do, right? Is there actually substance to all the hype that they've had? Obviously, going 4-8 shouldn't help anybody, but a quarterback that does have some talent, and a lot of people have him very high, on their radar. But in the SEC, you're going to have a guy like Jackson Dart, right? I mean, he's good. I wouldn't say he's an elite quarterback, but I think he's really good. And in that system, he's going to put up big numbers. And so there's always going to be challenges and, beating teams in the SEC. And then, I think about LSU. I like Nussmeier last year. I can't ever pronounce his last name, but he's a veteran backup that's now getting his first chance to start and has a lot of potential. I'm curious to see how he does. He's replacing some really, really big shoes. But Alabama is one where I would say I'm very interested, because this one to me has always kind of been on the balance of teeter-tottering. He's a guy that, and we've talked about this in other shows, is he really elevated. I mean, after week 4 last year, week 5, he was a different player. And he proved that he could move the chains both with his legs, obviously, but then with his arm later in the year. And if he can get it all together, he's a dynamic player, big, strong kid. But the question mark has always been, is he consistent enough in the throw game in order for his team to go all the way? And I think last year he showed that, especially with the right guys around him, that he could be. But now a new offensive coordinator, or new head coach. And I'm going to be honest with you, I really liked what they did at Washington. And so pairing those two together, it's going to be interesting. So definitely some good guys to keep eyes on.
Absolutely. Last question here for you, Steven. So with the expanded playoffs starting this year, right, you got 12 teams, 5 auto bids for the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So we know the SEC is getting at least one. There's 7 at-large bids. How many SEC teams do you think make it in? I mean, because everyone knows that SEC is the premier conference. So is a 9-3, A&M team, a 10-2, like how many do you think sneak in there?
Man, I guarantee you this is going to be a big debate. Fast forward, whatever it is, 5 months from now, and it's going to be a hot button issue. Just because no matter how many teams are in it, those last few, you could mix and match them with. People can make their argument. Last year, Florida State, I think, was the one that got left out, and it was a tough break because of their quarterback situation. But you would have to think that 3 teams do. But to your point, the record is going to be the biggest issue. Like, what if that 3rd team is 9-3? They, with their field play, deserve to be in, like people say, by the eye test. But is that the real measurement? Like, should a team like Florida State have gotten in even if their quarterback wasn't there, right? I think you have to do it based on the results of what happens on the field. But it's difficult to get out of the SEC. And so I would say my best prediction today would be 3, but you could also beat up on each other, and now all of a sudden maybe 1 or 2 only get in.
Absolutely. Steven, thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll catch up with you after SEC Media Days.
All right, buddy. Talk soon, man.
See ya. That's Stephen McGee there on the Boss Firearms Hotline. We'll hit a break in the 9 o'clock hour. We'll hear from Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC and Aaron Torres, so don't go anywhere. All that and more coming up. You're listening to TexAgs Radio, presented by David Garner's Jewelers. Welcome back in. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno. Again, Luke and Matthew Dawson will be in the host chairs tomorrow. Next week will be all SEC Media Days. We'll all be out there in Dallas bringing you all that coverage. Chris Gordy will also be out there, Locked On SEC host. Chris, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, man. Yeah, it's that time of year when we get to media days. It's like this thing is upon us, and football season is almost here.
Absolutely. First of all, are you staying safe down in Houston? Everything good on your end?
Yeah, lost the fence. Had power without power for a couple days, but we're back up and running. And yeah, man, pretty crazy. I'm from New Orleans originally. Been through some Cat 1s. That was about as pretty as intense of a Cat 1 as I've come through. So. But glad to hear mostly everybody around the area is doing much better now.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear that. So going into SEC Media Days, like you mentioned, just first things first, what are some of the big storylines that you'll be following, or what are some of the storylines you think will come out of SEC Media Days?
Well, I think the biggest one is obviously the two new additions in Texas and Oklahoma. How do they react? Do they make any headlines? It's kind of funny. I've been to a Big 12 Media Days a couple years back, and I mean, it was as low key as it gets. There was like 10 radio stations there. A coach walks through. You were just like, "Hey, coach, can we get you on?" "Yeah, come on." It was like SEC Media is much different than that. Mm-hmm. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of media members. Back when I started going over a decade ago, it was about 20 radio stations. Last year, I want to say it was about 50 to 60 radio stations, podcasts, every TV station. You think about even, the TV markets, they send, their camera crews, their sports reporters and all that. Well, now you have the Austin market, the San Antonio market, probably, they cover Longhorns, Norman, Oklahoma City. I mean, you're talking way more media now added to this thing. And I'm curious if Sark or Brent Venables says anything they might regret. I think, 10, 15 years ago, the SEC was always fun for media days because Steve Spurrier would take a jab at Tennessee and, would make headlines. Les Miles would say something kooky or whatever. But like nowadays, people are pretty buttoned up. I mean, Kirby, kind of toes the company line. Even Lane Kiffin, as outspoken as he is on Twitter, in front of a microphone, he doesn't say much.
Yeah.
He's very, buttoned up. And so I'll be curious to see who slips up next week and says something that grabs headlines because, this is that time of year where we don't have games to react to. So we're looking for anything. If Sark says, yeah, obviously, the A&M game is big, but Oklahoma's our biggest rivalry. I mean, boom, that's a headline right there. A&M disrespected by Sarkisian.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's going to be something like that comes out. But to me, that's the biggest storyline. The kind of other one is life after Nick Saban. I mean, I think I joked that 15 other coaches in the conference the night he announced his retirement all cracked open that special bottle of bourbon and had a nice cocktail and celebrated because ding dong, the witch is dead. Like he built that dynasty at Alabama and it was tough to overcome. A lot of teams, think about the repercussions of the past 10, 15 years. Like Les Miles would have had at least one more championship at LSU, if not, maybe a second one. You talk about Gene Chizik and, those guys at Auburn. Auburn probably would have had another title or two. Like it would have been more spread the wealth across the SEC had Saban not been dominating. I always tell people it's funny. In the late 2000s, it was fun because like LSU won a championship, then Urban Meyer won one, Auburn won one, and Bama won one. It was like, hey, this is fun. Everybody's taking a turn. And then it was like Bama. And it was like, no, this isn't fun anymore. Like it was more fun when everybody was taking turns and there was parity in the conference. And that's what's fascinating too about Georgia. I mean, they went for the three-peat last year, fell short, but if they win it all this year and they're going to be one of the favorites, you're talking 3 championships in 4 years. We may be throwing the D word around dynasty with the Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart for the next decade.
Absolutely. Talking to Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC here on TexAgs Radio. You mentioned the 2 new teams, Texas and OU. How do you think they will fare in their first season in the SEC?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an adjustment. I mean, ask A&M and ask Missouri. I think, when we look back on it, Kevin Sumlin even said it back in the day, like, we got to get better in the trenches. I think when they realized, they were in a tight battle with LSU late in that season, they realized they had the skill position players with Johnny Manziel and Mike Evans and all the great talent they had. Ryan Swope, I think, wasn't he around? I'm trying to think all the guys that were there, but like they had great skill position guys, but they did not have the trench play had to improve dramatically, offensive and defensive line. And over the years, we saw that happen at Missouri and Texas A&M. I think Texas is really good offensive line wise, but defensive line, I mean, they lose Tavondre Sweat, they lose Byron Murphy, they lose their D-line coach Bo Davis, leaves for LSU. Like, these are things I look at and go, ooh, red flag, red flag. Oklahoma has done a good job of beefing up their D-line. I think their O-line is going to be fine, but man, they're replacing a lot of starters there. So it's that to me is going to be the biggest storyline looking at those guys. And, you know, look, in the Big 12, look at what Texas did in recent years. You know, it's like you play a tight game with Kansas, or you play a tight game with Iowa State, and then you come back and you play Baylor. This isn't that. I mean, this is a much tougher conference. And while Texas has a little bit of an easier schedule, I think this year, it still is, you know, going to Arkansas is one that it's a trap game that if you're not ready, you're going to get bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of been the talking point here is, you know, Texas last season passed their dress rehearsal. They beat Bama on their own turf, right? But it's just going to be the week in, week out. Can they handle going to Georgia, then to Kentucky? And I don't have their schedule in front of me, but you get what I'm saying there. But this is kind of off-topic question, but it goes into what we were just talking about. So a lot of conference realignment this season, and we talked about it earlier. Which teams in new conferences do you think have the best chance to win the whole thing? My pick was Utah in the Big 12. Some of us had Oregon going to the Big 10 and winning it all. It might be for you, Texas in the SEC. So just out of the bunch, who do you think has the best chance to win their new conference?
Yeah, I think Utah is a really good pick for the Big 12. You know, Cam Rising's in like his 8th year there. Yeah. I mean, the guy's been hanging around a while, battling injuries. The Oregon one's interesting. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's good, but like, I don't know, man. Like it's a revolving door there. They keep bringing in quarterbacks and they have nice seasons. Bo Nix was great, but like couldn't get over the hump. They couldn't beat, they had a chance to beat Washington twice and they couldn't do it. So now you come into a tougher conference where you're adding Ohio State and Michigan and all these other great teams. It's going to be tough. I look at Texas and I just wonder, I know they're the sexy pick. Everybody's picking them as one, you know, one of the top 3 teams in the SEC. I just wonder, what are they? Are they for real? Because look at Steve Sarkisian's track record as a head coach. His best season when he was head coach at Washington was 8-4. His best season at USC was 9-4, and his best season at Texas prior to last year was 8-5. The 12-2 is almost an outlier. Like, I think Sark is more of an 8-9 win coach, which is good. That's a really good coach, you know, to have in college football. I just think this whole moniker of, oh, Texas is back, it reminds me when Tom Herman and Sam Ehlinger were up there holding the trophy, winning the Sugar Bowl, going, we're back. No, you're not. Like, you had a great year, but then you come back down to reality. Everything that Texas has to replace, that entire receiving core, look, they brought in some nice pieces through the transfer portal, but they've all got to develop that big C word. That's chemistry with Quinn Ewers. And I like Ewers, but also keep in mind, Ewers has been hurt each of the past 2 seasons. He's missed games. What happens if Arch Manning gets in there and lights it up? Mm-hmm. You might get Wally Pip, Quinn Ewers. Like the fan base is rabid for Arch. They may all jump on board with him. So we'll see what happens there. I think it's more liable. You know, Texas, there's nothing wrong with going 10-2. 10-2 maybe still get you into the playoff. 9-3 is still a really good season, but I'm not on board with this 12-0, you know, winning the SEC, going to Atlanta, winning the SEC title talk with Texas. I just don't. I think they're going to go through some growing pains in this conference. You can't just come into a new conference and dominate from day one, with the exception of, like you said, a Utah going to the Big 12. That the road actually gets easier for Utah and Colorado and those teams going to the Bid 12 as opposed to the Pac-12 last year.
Absolutely. How much do you think the SEC is going to benefit from the expanded playoffs, right? So you get your 1 auto bid for the conference champion, then you got 7 at-large spots up for grabs. Do you think they sneak in 3 teams, maybe 4? Like how much is a 9-3 SEC team going to be looked at? You know, what light are they going to be looked at compared to the rest of the nation?
Well, I think it's going to help a little bit, but keep in mind, we did this stupid thing where we allowed them to say 4 conference champions all move to the front of the line. Mm-hmm. And I think it's asinine. I think what should have happened was, you know, if we're going to go 12-team playoff, at the end of the, you know, after conference championship weekend, you know what the committee does? They all get together in a room and they announce, here's our teams. And they still do the 1 through 25, which I also think is stupid. Like, why are we doing the top 25? Like, who's ranked 24th doesn't matter. but like it should just be 1 through 12. That those final rankings, take 1 through 12. You're telling me right there, those are the 12 best teams in the country, right?
Yep.
If we're ranking them 1 through 25, 1 through 12 are the top 12 teams in the country. That's who should be in the playoff. But we said, no, we got to do conference champions because, you know, everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a turn. We got to give the Big 12 their spot and all this. And so there was a real scenario, and I keep throwing this out there, that the SEC could have 4 teams that are 10-2, you know, possibly an 11-1 and 3 teams 10-2. And one of those 10-2 teams is going to get left out because you're going to have possibly a 9-3 or 10-3 Big 12 champ, and say like Kansas State wins the Big 12. Mm-hmm. They move to the front of the line. They get a first round bye. You could have a 10-2, 9-3 Florida State wins the ACC. They move to the front of the line. And then keep in mind the highest ranked non-Power 5 gets an automatic bid, which last year would have been Liberty. Some people are talking up Fresno State as that team this year. They get an automatic seed. So, I mean, look, the SEC will probably get 3, maybe 4 teams in, but I had somebody ask me the other day, what do you think? You think the SEC will get 5? I'm like, no, mathematically, it's not going to happen because there's too many other teams that are going to be in this mix and are going to have better arguments for it. And one other thing I'll throw in too, it may behoove you not to go to Atlanta play for the SEC title game, because if you end up with 4 teams that are 10-2, if you're 10-2 and you go play 12-0 Georgia in the SEC title game and you lose, you're now 10-3, and now you got 10-2 Ole Miss and 10-2 Missouri looking sexier than you with 3 losses. I think they jump you. So there's a lot of things that can happen this year that are going to play out, but I just think the SEC, look, we know it's the most dominant conference, but pump the brakes on everybody thinking, oh, they're going to get 5-6 teams in. It's just not going to happen.
Talking to Chris Gordy here on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Chris, how do you think this year's SEC quarterback class will be perceived? Is it stronger than years past? Is it, less than that? What do you think?
I think it's a pretty strong class because, you bring back some knowns like Carson Beck and Connor Wegman and Jalen Milroe. And, all these guys are grabbing a lot of the headlines. Brady Cook at Missouri is really good. Graham Mertz, I think one of the more underrated quarterbacks at Florida, highest completion percentage in the SEC last year. But then there's some unknowns like Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. What is he going to be? I think a lot of people are expecting, look, he's not going to be Jaden Daniels, but he's a gunslinger. He's going to let fly, and he's going to throw for a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns. Nico Iamaleava was a big, highly touted 5-star quarterback at Tennessee. I think we're all excited to see what he does in a Josh Heupel offense. It's very quarterback friendly. So, there's a chance if this thing plays out the way I think it's going to play, we're going to look back at the end of the year and say, this was one of the strongest groups of quarterbacks in the SEC this season. And, look at the mock drafts. They've already got Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, all these guys are getting talked about as first-round picks next year. And I think it just speaks to the high volume or high level of play that the quarterback play is in the SEC right now. 11 of the 16 teams are bringing their quarterbacks to SEC Media Days. I think that says a lot.
Absolutely. Talking to Chris Gordy on the Boss Firearms Hotline, looking at all things SEC. Let's kind of widen our look here around the rest of the league. Recently on your Locked On SEC YouTube channel, you're talking about the Gators and you're giving reasons for optimism. But I want you to do 2 things. Give us reasons for optimism for the Gators, and then if things go sideways, especially in that last half of the season when the schedule gets really tough, what's it going to be like in Gainesville at the end of the year?
Well, I think here's the thing. We've all talked about how difficult the schedule is, and everybody's already been putting Billy Napier on the hot seat. I mean, shoot, Billy Napier was on the hot seat from the minute they hired him. I mean, they were like, I don't know if this is the right hire. This guy coming from Louisiana. So, I think he's an actual good coach. I think he's a good offensive mind. It's just that schedule has been absolutely brutal since he stepped foot in Gainesville. Whoever made that schedule for them, I mean, their non-conference this year, their only guaranteed win is Samford. Their other non-conference games are Florida State, Miami, and USF, or UCF rather. Mm-hmm. Whoever made that schedule, I just think you got to look at it and go, dude, you're doing me no favors here. Where's, give me a Citadel, give me a Southeastern Louisiana, give me somebody that I can put guaranteed W's in the win column. But no, I just explored the idea of, I think Graham Mertz is actually a really good quarterback. They brought in one of his receivers from Wisconsin that he has a lot of familiarity with. Trey Wilson is a really good receiver that was a high recruit at Florida who came on last year. I think he's set for a big season. You lose Trevor Etienne, but I think Montrell Johnson can be a featured back. He's split in time, and now he'll be the guy back there in the backfield. I think the O-line's decent. I think the defense is a little bit better this year. So, there's reasons for optimism for Florida, but I just think they have to get off to a fast start. And that first game out of the gates, Miami, you have to win that one. It's in Gainesville. I know you're an underdog. You win that one, it sets up, you can start the season 5-0, and then the gauntlet starts. You know, last season, what they did, they started hot early in the year, and then they basically lost out and finished 5-7. Like, you have to win these early games. And I think 6-6 is possible for Florida. And I think if they do that and get to a bowl game, they did bring in 5-star quarterback DJ Lagway this year. I think you're going to find ways to get him on the field. The future looks bright. If you stick with Napier next year with Lagway as the starter in 2025, I think Florida can really start to be a contender. But unfortunately, if he wins 5 games or less, I think they're going to fire him. You probably lose DJ Lagway to the transfer portal, and you're hitting the reset button all over again.
What are your expectations for LSU this season with new coordinators on each side of the ball?
Yeah, I think the offense is going to be fine. I mean, we saw in the bowl game, you know, we saw Garrett Nussmeier get the start. We saw their new OCs, you know, who were promoted in-house, quarterback coach and wide receiver coach Cortez Hankton. Like, they did the dual thing, and it worked fine. The offense looked great. I think they're going to run the football well. You know, I wouldn't say this is a given for any other school. Normally, you lose a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, you're going, well, this thing's going to take a big step back. I think LSU's offense is going to be fine. It's the defense where I still have the biggest questions. And I think they made some great hires this offseason, bringing in Blake Baker from Missouri, who had an awesome defense last year for the Tigers. You bring in Bo Davis on the D-line. You bring in Corey Raymond as the DB coach, bringing back who was the architect of DBU. I think all the coaches' hires are great. They just don't have the talent yet. I mean, I look at their defensive line. They are thin as can be down there. Cornerbacks, you know, for LSU, who used to pride themselves on DBU with Morris Claiborne and Tyrann Mathieu and all these guys, they don't have any of those dudes right now in the secondary. I think Jordan Gilbert will, you know, help a little bit at the safety spot coming over from A&M, but I just look at their talent on the defense and I say that they're not good enough. And so that's going to be the question. For LSU last year, Jaden Daniels was able to bail them out, and they were able to win games, you know, 50-42. They're going to have to do that again this year with Nussmeier, because I just think the defense, they'll maybe be slightly improved, but not enough to, you know, win the SEC or go undefeated.
Talking to Chris Gordy on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Which SEC teams have the biggest surprise potential for you?
I keep telling people, keep an eye on Arkansas, because nobody expects anything from them. A lot of people expect Sam Pittman, you know, on the hot seat, could be fired at the end of this year. But they brought in Bobby Petrino, and he, you know, I know A&M fans may have mixed, whatever perspectives on him, but he's still a really good offensive mind. And they bring in Taylon Green from Boise State. We had him on Locked On SEC a couple weeks ago, and Taylon Green's a dual threat. He can run it, he can throw it. But he said he sat down with Bobby Petrino and he showed him film on Lamar Jackson. And I'm not saying Taylon Green's going to be Lamar Jackson, but I think there's some elements of his game that Petrino called when he was at Louisville that they can use with Taylon Green. And then they bring in Jaquindon Jackson, the running back who's formerly at Texas and then Utah. I think he's going to be an upgrade. Rocket Sanders just can never stay healthy for Arkansas. And it's crazy to say a team that loses KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders to the portal might be better on offense with Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson, but I think they are. There's a reason Arkansas is bringing wide receiver Andrew Armstrong to SEC Media Days. I think the offense is going to be a lot better this year. I think a lot of people are looking at their schedule and see Arkansas and just automatically penciling in a W. I think Arkansas is absolutely going to upset one or two, you know, teams this year they have no business beating, because I think that offense is going to be so much better under Petrino.
Last question here for you, Chris. What do you make of Brett Yormark's comments yesterday? I saw you put out a tweet on it, but his comments yesterday at Big 12 Media Days, he said, "I will not stop until the Big 12 is the #1 conference in America." Do you see that happening?
Yeah, it's just stupid. I mean, it's like The Rock. Know your role and shut your mouth. Like, you're the #4 team in the country or conference in the country, and that's where you are. Like, you're not going to surpass the SEC. I love that Greg Sankey even took to Twitter, was like tweeting out, "Look at our social media growth. We have more followers combined with our teams on social media than the other A4 combined." Like, it's, you know, it just is what it is. Unless you suddenly overnight are going to add, you know, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Texas, unless you're going to add those teams overnight, like, you're never going to be the #1 conference in America. And that's fine. I think they've done a nice job of pivoting and, you know, keeping their conference afloat while the Pac-12 was falling apart and the ACC is fighting lawsuits over teams trying to get out of their conference. I think they did a good job of adding Houston and Cincinnati and BYU and UCF, and now adding Arizona State and Utah and Colorado. That's a fine conference, but you still third or fourth best. You're never going to be number one. And so that's great. He can think that they're going to be number one, but I'm sorry. As long as the SEC is doing what they're doing, you will never be the number one conference in the country, Big 12.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you for taking the time. Be safe getting up to Dallas, and we'll see you up there.
All right, guys. Sounds good.
See you, man. That's Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Go check him out on social media, YouTube, all that good stuff. We'll hit a break here on the other side. Open segment, we'll check in with Luke and Carson. Then after that, we'll talk to AT, Aaron Torres on the phone here in the 9 o'clock hour. You're listening to TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner Jewelers. The boys' version of TexAgs Radio rolls on, presented by David Garner Schulers. We're here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno. We got Carson Stein and Luke Evangelos out back helping us out. A lot of soccer talk between the break. David would be proud if he was here.
Hello? Oh, yeah. Oh, wait.
You're
want
allowed
us
to chime in, yeah.
Oh, okay. Wait, do you want to introduce the topic or?
What topic?
Are we talking about the Uruguay-Colombia
Oh, sure,
fight
yeah.
last night?
I mean, I was going to lead into that, but we were talking about the U.S. men's team's coach got fired, and I said, I don't care. And Bronny reliably told me that I should care very much. So
yeah, you should. Soccer is a fast-growing game in the U.S. The World Cup performance a couple of years ago parlayed with hosting the World Cup in a couple of years. It's no secret why soccer is becoming incredibly popular. And with a horrible showing at Copa America, I think it was time to fire him. And I'm very interested to see who the U.S. national team hires. And I know that may not be true for the rest of our audience, but soccer is fun. And I know Richard agrees with me. He loves soccer too.
So how many brawls will we see in the World Cup at America? When is it coming to America? In
2026.
Oh, yep. Wow. So really close. How many fights will we see in the stands?
Well, given that Uruguay, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, a lot of Brazil, a lot of the Copa America teams that you would classify as feisty are going to be there. If you just watch the Euros compared to Copa America, it is so obvious just the difference of level in play and attitude about the game. In Europe, you watch the fans are chanting. There's like 60,000 Netherlands fans and then like a corner of 10,000 England fans. I didn't see a single fight from there. But then you come to the Copa America game and it's like Colombia and Uruguay, two teams who you wouldn't think hate each other, and they're brawling in the stands. You got Uruguay players going in the stands because Colombia fans are going after their family members. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. If I were there, I would be concerned for my safety, but watching it from the outside, this is pure entertainment, and I just cannot wait to see what happens next, honestly.
I think Carson's with me. He's not a huge soccer guy. Or am I wrong about that, Carson?
Not a big soccer guy. Unless the World Cup comes around, not a big soccer guy.
True red-blooded Americans here in the studio. But anyways, enough soccer talk. I'm not qualified to speak on soccer at all. But anyways, I wanted to ask y'all this before we get to Aaron Torres. What do y'all, Luke and Carson, what do you think? And if you're on the text line, feel free to text in 979-693-1150. What do you think the national talking heads will have to say about A&M at SEC Media Days next week? And Carson, I'll let Carson take this first, Luke. What do you think the big talking points will be for A&M football?
Obviously, it's going to be a lot of the head coaching change, all the players that have left and come into the portal. I think a lot of it's just going to be on Mike Elko and what can he do in this first year, what kind of structure and culture can he build in this first year with a relatively manageable schedule compared to what A&M's gotten in the past.
Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Carson hit it right on the head. It's going to be in a league that typically does not have the most coaching turnover. Coaching changes.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big year for it. No Nick Saban. You bring in two new teams. Alabama, brand new head coach. A&M, brand new head coach. So Mississippi State as well. There's going to be a lot of talk about how will new coaches be able to adjust especially with Georgia now being the powerhouse. It now goes from everyone wants to beat Alabama, beat Nick Saban. It's going to be Georgia has that target on their back. In terms of A&M, Carson was absolutely right. Transfer portal, what was lost, what was gained sometimes, what was gained from SEC teams, what was lost to other SEC teams. You have players from A&M last year who will be impact players on other teams around the country and other teams at SEC Media Days. So how will that relationship go, move forward? And with A&M maybe having to face some former players on their team last year, I think that will be a storyline. In terms of when A&M goes on the mic on Thursday, I think one of the big storylines will be how impressive and well thought out Mike Elko is. Everyone at A&M knows it. We've seen it at the introductory press conference, but I think this will be one of the first times the national media gets to see it back at A&M and at SEC Media Days. I think a lot of people are going to be blown away with Torian York and how well-spoken he is, and what a great representative of A&M he is. And also just that young man being just just over a year removed from being in high school football, still a very young player. He's got more years ahead of him. but what a great leader he is for A&M, and you can't wait to see what he's going to do on the field this year.
I just think it's going to be a total vibe shift from last year, right? With the previous coaching regime in, it was a lot of, I don't want to say negative. It was just like a lot of, hey, I need to show me this, or, uncomfortable conversations will be had, versus this year. I think it's going to be a lot of, hey, like you just mentioned, Coach Elko will probably be pretty impressive to a lot of these media members, and they'll come away thinking, I think the Aggies have the right leader in place, and it's a total 180 from what we've seen in previous years. So I think it's going to be a lot of, hey, optimism towards the A&M program versus a kind of stale, I feel like, were the feelings towards A&M. Like, hey, let's start to see some results here. So I think that'll be a welcome change for all of us there and all of you watching at home. So we'll hit a break here. On the other side, we'll get to Aaron Torres, AT, talk a little bit about college football. I want to ask him his thoughts on the Bronny James situation. I know we mentioned that Tuesday when I was hosting. Never really got into it, but AT, I'm sure, has a great take on that. So keep it right here. Aaron Torres coming up next right here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Welcome back in. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. We're going to go out to the Boss Firearms hotline here in 1 second to talk to Aaron Torres of Fox Sports Radio. We're going around college football, basketball, baseball, you name it. And that's brought to you by Milliken Reserve, a College Station community featuring homes, trails, farms, and wide open spaces with a mission to build healthy community around nature. Take part in the Milliken Reserve community with a Conservancy membership. Learn more at millikenreserve.com. Let's go out to the hotline now. Aaron, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Nick. Maybe we stay away from baseball today.
Yeah.
I know that every time that I look up, Coach Early is signing another big-time portal kid, but I'm not going to lie, I have not done too much of my homework on the catcher from St. Mary's, so I don't want to speak out of school about the new star catcher that's coming to Aggie land. So forgive me on that one.
Well, AT, yeah. You'll be happy to know I do not have a single baseball question written down because I'm like you. I'm ready to get into some football talk because it's time to do it. So obviously SEC Media Days coming up next week. Just what are some of the big storylines you think are going to come out of it? Which storylines are you going to be following closely?
Well, I mean, what stories are going to come out of SEC Media Days? Listen, a couple things. One, from the national perspective, it feels like coming out of Big 12 Media Days this week, there is kind of an undercurrent that we are not in a stable place with realignment. Florida State clearly wants out. Clemson clearly wants out of the ACC. There was some news yesterday that any lawsuits that are involved will go through North Carolina. That's boring legalese, but it feels like there's an undercurrent that something's still going on. Not saying that something happens next week necessarily like it did at SEC Media Days in 2021 with Texas and Oklahoma, just that there's an undercurrent. Then from, the SEC perspective, listen, it is a bold new world, not just for the SEC, but for all of college football. 2 new teams in the SEC, no division. I think it completely changes how we cover college football, how we talk about college football in both positive and negative ways. And so I know I've told David this a million times over the course of the spring and summer, but, I really look at it and I sit there and say, I don't think fans fully realize what we're getting into, again, in both positive and negative ways, where a second loss in a season doesn't undo your whole season. But at the same time, there's imbalanced schedules, nothing's perfect, et cetera. So I could go on and on, but those are 2 quick things that I think are going to be storylines, not only throughout SEC Media Days, but really in the lead up to the season there in week 0 and week 1 in late August.
Are there any coaches or players you'll be paying, most attention to? A lot of new coaches, I think, a lot of new coaches we'll be seeing definitely more than we're used to, especially in the SEC. A lot of new faces this year.
Yeah, I mean, Texas and Oklahoma are obvious. I'll tell you, and you're in that part of the country, so you might have a better feel for this, Nick. Obviously, by the way, Kalen DeBoer, everyone I think is intrigued to see, his first real major appearance as the Alabama football coach. I know he's done stuff, but, SEC Media Days is just different. I think the guy that I'm sort of intrigued by is Brian Kelly in LSU. It just feels weird over there. Last year, they had a good season, but I think it was still deemed a little bit of a disappointment coming off that 10-win season in year 1. Now you lose Jaden Daniels, who's obviously a Heisman Trophy winner. And it's just this weird thing, like I said, where you win 10 games, you have a Heisman Trophy winner. They're actually recruiting well in 2024 and 25. They have obviously the number 1 player in America committed for 2025. So, but it just feels like there's some LSU fans aren't happy or they're not really a believer in this process with Brian Kelly. So I think I'm just kind of curious to hear how he views the state of this program. Then obviously, again, Kalen DeBoer. I think Billy Napier is going to say all the right things about, his job status, but I think it's perilous. I think if he has a really bad season, we're probably looking at a new Florida coach at this time next year. So, yeah, man, it's the SEC. There's never a shortage of storylines, and I think certainly this year it'll be much the same.
Talking to Aaron Torres on the Boss Firearms hotline, Aaron Torres of Fox Sports Radio and the Aaron Torres podcast. Do you think we'll see any movement on a new SEC scheduling model at all? Do you think it's time that something like that starts to be put in place with the 9-game conference schedule?
Yeah, I think just reading the tea leaves, you see day after day, it feels like future out-of-conference schedules are being changed. What was it? Auburn? What was it? Florida and Cal, I saw, canceled a series for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how college football is going to survive without that one because, I was looking forward to those Florida-Cal games like you can't even imagine, Nick. But, no, Florida-Cal, I think, what was it, Georgia and UCLA maybe? I can't remember all the details, but it feels like we're going towards 9. And, bluntly, I don't know why we wouldn't. First of all, it's obviously good for the fans. I think you're talking about a 12-team playoff era where, again, a loss isn't going to derail your entire season for any team in any conference. And so there's no reason that the SEC shouldn't be playing more games because more games mean more money for the league and the league members. So that, to me, is where we're headed. I think the other thing, too, is just with the way the conferences are, it's harder to find more high-profile out-of-conference games just because there's fewer teams. The pool is smaller just because of the circumstances of college football. So anyway, I bring it up to just very simply say, I think we're going to get there. I don't know if an official announcement will come next week, but it feels like sooner rather than later we'll be at a 9-game SEC schedule going forward. And like I said, I think for the betterment of the sport, I have no complaints about adding an extra league game.
Talking to Aaron Torres here on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Aaron, how much do you think the SEC will benefit from the expanded playoffs this year? They get the auto bid with their conference champion. How many at-large teams do you think will sneak in there? How will the committee weigh a 9-3 SEC team compared to a 10-2 Big 12 team? What do you think?
Yeah, I think historically the SEC has always gotten the benefit of the doubt, including last year with Alabama over Florida State. For the record, I said it at the time, I believe it at the time, Alabama was the better team. Florida State didn't have Jordan Travis. They weren't the same team that started 11-0 with him. But, the SEC always gets the benefit of the doubt. That's also, I think, Nick, what frustrates me with the continued talk of, well, is 12 enough? And, what if we go to 14 teams? And should we have automatic bids? And it's like, at a certain point, you can expand to the detriment of the regular season. And I think we'd start getting perilously close, if we go beyond 12. You start to get 14, 16, 18, 20, 24. All of a sudden, the regular season does at some point become diminished. And then the other thing is, the reason I was told that we had to expand the playoff was to make it a national event. And so it's like, now I'm hearing all these people say we shouldn't have automatic bids. And it's like, well, how many SEC teams do we really need? Like we have this thing called the regular season to kind of determine who's best in the SEC. And so, like I said, I go to the 12-team model, and I say, look, the SEC is probably going to get 4 teams every year. And I said this consistently is there's never been a year in my life where the 5th best team in the SEC was good enough to win the national championship. So it's not like we're leaving out teams that are good enough to win it all. So my guess is the SEC ultimately ends up with 4 teams in this current playoff. And I think once we actually see what the product is, I hope we as a community see that 12 is definitely enough for a college football playoff. But unfortunately, as we know, most of these decisions are not made for the good of the sport, but instead what can generate the most money. And so my fear is even if the 12-team playoff is a hit, we get some sort of change to it pretty quickly there in the future.
Talking to Aaron Torres on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Aaron, which teams joining a new conference this season have the best chance to win it? It's kind of a show topic we've been talking about all throughout the day today. A popular pick has been Utah joining the Big 12. They probably become the best team, as soon as they join. There's Oregon in the Big 10. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think those two, and obviously Texas is an obvious one. I don't want to say I'm not quite as high on Texas because I kind of am, but I actually think, I'll say this, is that I think that there's going to be a little bit, in my opinion, of a culture shock of, I think, how good 2 or 3 of those programs are that are coming into the Big Ten. And I would start with Oregon. I planning, and listen, I know the story came out this week that, their NIL funds are basically unlimited, fueled by Nike and Phil Knight. But however Dan Lanning's getting players, he's still developing them and he's still winning with them. And I think they are coming in to the Big Ten as a team that is absolutely good enough to win it. And I think it's going to be jarring to some schools how good that program is and how far along they are, and how even good schools in the previous iteration of the Big Ten are going to have a lot of catching up to do. So I know Utah's probably the best answer. I think they were actually picked to win the Big 12. I could be mistaken on that. But I don't think other Big Ten schools realize quite how good Oregon is, quite how talented that roster is, quite how deep it is, quite how physical it is, and quite how ready they're going to be for Big Ten play.
Did you see Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders' comments yesterday at Big 12 Media Days, kind of changing it up here a little bit, but I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I believe it was something about Colorado is everyone's Super Bowl and our wins mean something different. What's your take on those comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to diminish them, but I think they're right. I mean, listen, we just talked about Oregon. I correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, I didn't see Dan Lanning's pregame speech for Oregon played 13 games last year. I only saw it for one out of those 13 games. I didn't see it for Oregon State. I didn't see it for Utah. I didn't see it for Washington. I saw it for Colorado. Sorry, there's a car driving by me right now. It's pretty loud. And so, I saw that. I saw Matt Rule in an interview with Joel Klatt the other day say that Colorado gave Nebraska a bigger stage last year. So, I'm going off of, what do they say? Judge people by their actions, not their words. It's like the actions kind of reflect that that there's some truth to that. And then from Deion's comments, Deion said something to the effect of, I'm judged differently than every other coach, which I heard. And I think that's fair as well. I think any other coach in America, if they took a one-win team that was the definitive worst team in college football, in Power 5 football the year before, to 4 wins, including a win over the reigning national runners-up, I think we'd sit there and say, hey, if that was Nick Savage or Aaron Torres, it certainly wouldn't have made as many headlines, but I think we'd say that's a successful first year. For Deion, all I ever heard with Deion is how overrated he is, how much he stinks. He's all hype. It's all sizzle, no steak. So, I saw a lot of people yesterday kind of diminishing those comments, and it's like, okay, I don't know. I just fundamentally think that they are probably on to something. Now, do I think they talk more than they win, at least towards the end of last year? I do, but I don't think it means that what they said in those comments is factually incorrect. But obviously they made quite a few headlines yesterday afternoon.
That's Aaron Torres of Fox Sports Radio. Aaron, thank you for taking the time, and we'll catch up with you probably after SEC Media Days next week. And like you said, it's full football go mode, so thank you again.
I know. Yeah, Nuno always bails on me when it's time to talk media days. I'll be there next year. I couldn't make it this year, so maybe Nuno will actually make a few minutes for me next year. We'll see. But thank you, Nick. I appreciate it, and have a great day, okay?
Thank you. You too. That's Aaron Torres on the Boss Firearms Hotline. We're going to hit a quick break here. And on the other side, a really short segment to close the 9 o'clock hour. And the 10 o'clock hour, again, we'll hear from Bronny with his interview with Jason Kelly, associate head baseball coach over there. It's worth re-listening to. And then 10:35, we'll hear from Caroline Fenton of Yahoo Sports. So don't go anywhere. This is TexAgs Radio, presented by David Garner's Jewelers. Welcome in. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner Jewelers. Real short segment here on the other side, or in the 10 o'clock hour. I'll preview that for you. 10 o'clock, we're going to hear from Ryan Broninger and Jason Kelly, their interview yesterday. In case you missed that, it's worth listening to. New associate head coach of Texas A&M baseball. And at 10:35, Caroline Fenton. We'll catch up with her. She got a new gig again, moved from Nashville. She might still be in Nashville, but from radio in Nashville to Yahoo Sports. Still a Sirius XM college sports radio host. So we'll talk all things SEC football with her. And then, again, the boys will be here. Luke Evangelist is behind the glass. Carson Stein over at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center. So, again, we'll send it to break here. And on the other side, we'll chit-chat a little bit before we get to that Bronny and Jason Kelly interview. So don't go anywhere. It's TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, 10 o'clock hour here on the program. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno. Tomorrow, Luke Evangelos and Matthew Dawson will be in here to close out our week. And then, again, next week we hit the ground running. SEC Media Days up at the Omni Hotel in Dallas. TexAgs will have all sorts of coverage for you. We're going to talk to all kinds of big-name media guests. We look forward to that. Luke, are you excited for your first trip up to SEC Media Days? I know that was a big goal for you when you first started at TexAgs, and you made it come true, man.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. I remember last year being behind the scenes. Even, there's a lot of people that go to SEC Media Days from TexAgs, but there's still work to be done in the back. And I remember Kay and myself were grinding, like every single guest, transcribing. We're doing notes, we're doing tweets, cutting, putting on the site. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. And I remember how much fun I had being on this side of it, that I was like, man, I can't wait to actually go. I want to go. And thankfully it was in Dallas, a city that I happen to live in, and that my parents live in. So I'm very fortunate that that call was made. And so very thankful to be going, thankful for David for bringing me along, and for you for teaching me a lot of things that I'm going to do there. And yeah, I'm very excited for it.
Well, you made it happen too, man. You did what you're supposed to do in this industry, is you let people know what your goals are, and you put your name out there, and that's exactly what you did, and you made it work. So again, it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. So I wanted to ask Aaron Torres this, but we ran out of time, and I know Luke and Carson, even maybe y'all will have better takes on this than I do, because I'm not a basketball guy, or not an NBA guy. I'm a huge Aggie basketball guy. Don't really care about the NBA. Bronny James, I know it's a topic of conversation. I've noticed that ESPN has kind of started to shift its tone towards him. I think I got a notification on my phone yesterday that said something like Bronny James gets cooked or something. I don't know if y'all got that as well.
I remember seeing that as well.
Luke, I'll start with you. What's your whole take on that situation? Is it fair that he got drafted in the second round? There's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft, correct?
Correct.
So, obviously picked there because he wants to, or I guess LeBron James wants to play with him. So what do you make of all that? Is he ready for the league?
So on one hand, well, first of all, it doesn't matter what I think, because he's going to be on the Lakers roster no matter what.
Yeah.
He's not going to play in the G League. He will have a spot, presumably on the bench. The good thing about Bronny is he'll get to pick what seat on the bench he wants. I'm sure he'll have first dibs over everyone else on the team. But in his situation, look, the NBA draft is different because you can look at a guy like Boots or like Drew Timme or Zach Edey even, who are very productive and have very long and prosperous college careers, but none of that matters because the NBA picks on potential. Now, could I look at Bronny and be like, oh, his 5.8 points per game, his 3 assists per game at USC shows potential? In my eyes, no, but I'm also not the specimen of the greatest player, in my opinion, to ever walk this earth. I think LeBron is the GOAT, and that's my opinion on it.
If David was here, would have just taken a turn for the worse right there.
Right, but that's my opinion. So Bronny has some leeway in that regard. Sure, if you're LeBron James' son, you have more potential and more ability than most players on earth. That's your natural gift because you are the son of LeBron James. But I do not think it's fair. If again, life is not fair, but from a fan perspective, someone watching the NBA, I don't think it's fair that he was picked, and also that his contract was significantly more than historically what other people picked in that 55 to 58 range get.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
wild.
like he's guaranteed. Well, look, LeBron took a pay cut. Either way,
okay,
that money is going to the James family. It's just LeBron took like a $5 million pay cut, so Bronny's contract is not the normal $500,000 you would get for being drafted in that slot. It's now $5 million. So technically, it's just that money's going to LeBron or Bronny. It's now that money is split up a little bit. So I don't think it's fair. But then again, when you're the greatest player, maybe of all time, but definitely currently in the league, you get some pull that other players may not. So again, I don't think it's fair, but that's just the reality we live in of LeBron is essentially the coach of the Lakers. He gets to pick his coach. He gets to pick his team. He gets to pick what players he wants to play with. And the fact that one of those players happens to be his son, good for him. I'm excited to see them play together. But, from what I've seen in Summer League, I'm getting a notification, Bronny's first bucket, Bronny gets dunked on. I personally don't care, but that is what ESPN chooses to broadcast. So I don't really have the right to complain about that.
You made a great point. The thing that, as someone who's doesn't care about the NBA as well, the thing that bothers me about it, like you mentioned, is like, does that take a roster spot away from like Boots, who we all know, we've watched him play here for so long. We all know he deserves a chance in the league. And, I'm not saying it's that specific spot. He's not even on the Lakers. He's not in their organization. But, just stuff like that kind of bothers me, maybe takes away from somebody who has earned the spot to play and they're not getting that. But, Carson, any text messages, any topics on, on YouTube, anything you want to get into before we get to the Ryan Broniger and Jason Kelly interview?
Nothing really on the text line or anything, but I did want to kind of weigh in on the Bronny James situation. I think it's unfair what the media is kind of pushing on him. Like, he's not going to be his dad. He is a vastly different player than his dad. And I think he just needs to fit into his own role. And everyone's going to want him to be the next LeBron James. They're going to want him to be an MVP level all-star player, and that's just not who he's going to be. I think he can be a good NBA player. It's just more of a role player, kind of like similar to what Drew Holiday's done in his career. That's just my take.
If I could just chime in super quick on that note, this is not the first time like nepotism has come into the league. People forget that Giannis Antetokounmpo's brother, Thanasis Antetokounmpo, is without a doubt one of the worst players I've ever seen. Like, when he gets in the game, like, it is not highlights time, it's lowlights time. Like, Thanasis is going to turn the ball over or brick a shot. There's footage of him like calling for the ball and begging for the ball when they're down 30. So if that's what makes Giannis comfortable, having his own brother on the team and he's the superstar of that team, he gets more privileges than other people. I'm fine by that. So I think Bronny falls under the same category of, you've got a really high-profile family member on the team. It's not fair. You're taking a roster spot from someone else. But if that's what satisfies the Lakers and the Bucks, I'm not one to complain about it.
I'll take your word for it, Luke. Resident NBA expert here in the TexAgs office. Let's get to the Ryan Broniger and Jason Kelly interview again. This was yesterday. If you missed it, Bronny sat down with all three assistant coaches here in studio. All of them were great. Head to TexAgs.com if you want to hear all of them. But I really like Jason Kelly, the associate head baseball coach and pitching coach at Texas A&M. So really good conversation. Check that out. Here it is.
Associate head coach and pitching coach Jason Kelly. Coach, this is actually the first time for me and you to meet. I'd met the other staff, a little bit different for you coming from Seattle now to Texas. I got to ask, the differences in the weather today, what's it like in Seattle compared to College Station?
Well, it's early in the morning there, but it's probably 82 with no humidity and the best time of year there, which seems to be traditionally the time when I leave. And you're either recruiting somewhere hot or you're taking a new job somewhere hot. So my family's enjoying the nice weather at the pool, and it's a great time of year up there.
All right, so take me back through your just decision to do this. I know that's been a popular question for you, to leave a head coaching job in the Pacific Northwest and take the associate head job here at Texas A&M under a guy that I think you really respect in Mike Early. What was the conversations like, and then what was the reception from your family whenever you told them, I think I want to do this?
It was a whirlwind. We didn't have much time to do it. As you guys know how fast that process went, but being at Washington, which was a place I loved and a place that, I cut my teeth at the Power 5 level, going through the last 2 years, I knew that there might be a time when I wanted to come back to the SEC. Just to win a championship, to win the last game of the season. That's a goal of mine, as it is with everybody, but didn't want to do it in a way that wasn't, a perfect fit. And so I had never even thought about Mike getting this job but wanted to come back at some point. And then when this started to go down and it started to get serious, and he called, he goes, hey, I need to know, if it's a yes or a no from you. And I went to my wife and kids, and we had a difficult conversation. My wife was in, and she's supportive of all that. My daughter's going to be a junior. My son's going to be a freshman. So that friend base was difficult. We had just brought him back. But after a couple of minutes, they said they were in. So I told Mike, hey, man, if this goes your way. And then the next day he got the job. And then it was the real question, are you in? And I'm like, I'm in. There's some things we got to discuss, obviously, with contract stuff and terms and stuff like that. But if all that stuff's good, then I'm in. He called back an hour later. I got the job. And it was like, oh, here we go. And I got in Friday night, and we've been going as hard as we can ever since.
Yeah, drinking out of a fire hose, I imagine, every day. But your time at LSU and in the league, Was that more of a factor, or was it the relationship with Mike, or was it a combination of both?
It was a combination of both. I after being at LSU, had gotten a taste of what the league was, so I wasn't afraid of the challenge. I was excited about the challenge, and then being with Mike, you want to work with people that you want to be around every day, and that's sometimes not always the case, and sometimes that's hard to find that situation. He was one of 3 or 4 people that if they got a job, I would have to really think about going to work for him. We have the same philosophy. We knew when we were at Arizona State together, we just had a different kind of vibe together. And I knew he treated the players the way I wanted the players to be treated. I treated them the way we kind of vibed in that way. So when this happened, I knew that I could come to a place that had a chance to win a national championship where I could be myself. I could coach the way I wanted to coach. I didn't have to adapt to another guy's style. He knew how I did it, and I wanted the freedom to be able to do that, and Mike's going to allow me to do that. And then being able to go upstairs in those office with Mike and Caleb and Foxy and Hutch and all those guys, it's just a great vibe. And only been here for a couple of days, but it feels like home already.
The autonomy that you will have over your pitchers, I'm sure that's a big deal, especially coming from a head coaching job. But what a lot of the fans are going to want to know is, what does that look like? What does a Jason Kelly staff look like? How is it, from a player-coach perspective, but also when these fans buy tickets and they go to Bluebell Park and you try to guy out there on the rubber, what does that look like as well? Or what are your goals for it to look like?
Right. Well, it's not – I don't want it to look much different than it did last year. I mean, that was a successful year for them. They're in the top 5 or 6 in the country in ERA and strikes thrown and strikeouts. So I want to follow that blueprint, and that means you've got good pitchers. We're going to compete at a high level. We're going to do the little things, me being a West Coast guy. We're going to hold runners. We're going to field our position, and we're going to throw a ton of strikes. And that's what every pitching coach is going to say. We're going to compete. We're going to compete with the fastball. We're going to locate that pitch and then have an elite secondary pitch. And then my kind of bread and butter in this thing is development, is developing that third pitch, either getting it to cut a little bit, getting it to sink, bringing the change into it. So being able to, hopefully you see guys 1 week, next week after that you start to see the development of them getting better with a certain pitch. So development will be the key for me. That's exciting because we're going to bring in talent, and if you develop that talent, you got a chance to really be special.
The bullpen sessions, I think every pitching coach, and I'm not a pitching guy, I was a hitter. I did hitting lessons. I'm a hitter. Like I'm more aligned with Caleb and Mike than you. So, and I will say that I don't know what I'm looking at. I coach travel baseball when my guys aren't throwing the ball over the plate. I'm like, hey, dude, just get them to swing. It's not that easy. But the bullpen sessions, what I've been able to watch through my years in baseball, every coach does bullpen sessions a little bit different. So for your bullpen sessions, is it a ton of like the data, the pitch analytics, or is it a lot more of just feel?
It's going to be data for sure. Whether or not I'm dealing with that in the moment is kind of going to be moment to moment. I'm a hands-on guy. I'm going to be back there with them. I'm going to be making adjustments. It's about the mentality in there. So getting them to find the right state of mind, being able to adjust, pitch for pitch, those type of things. I'm going to be really, really involved. We've got an incredible analytics department. I'm going to let those guys do what they do well, and then those guys will report to me, and then I'll be the guy that makes those adjustments. How do we get that curveball from 2300 spin to get it to 26? That's where I step in, and when those guys are kind of pointing you in the right direction, it also creates some separation for the players. They know that they can go to certain people and get some data information and see what they're doing, but also come to me and get a different vibe of, I get it, great, you're spinning at 2800, that's awesome, but how do we get people out with that? That becomes my job. So working together and already being with those guys up there, they do a great job. So I think it's going to be a really good kind of culmination of good people. Yeah,
like they say, what can be measured can be improved.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
But there's also, I love that, I'm sure you saw it on the Washington Nationals bullpen, the sign, we don't care how hard you throw a ball for.
Yeah.
So looking at this A&M, have you been able to dive into the guys that are coming back? Have you looked at any of the profiles of the guys that will be on the roster next year? I know how difficult this week has probably been, but have you looked at anything like that?
I've dug in a little bit. Most of my work on digging in has been with incoming guys coming in from the portal over the last couple of days. I've talked to almost everybody. We've had communication, so I know what they do, and I've gotten a good breakdown from the coaching staff on kind of where each guy needs to go, that next step that they feel. Incredibly talented. I mean, I'm sitting back here and Mike and Caleb are going, yeah, 94 to 98, okay, next guy, 92 to 96 with a hammer. And I'm just going, what are we complaining about? Like, the horses are in the stable. Yeah. So it'll be about getting those guys focused on the right things and then forming a bullpen and putting guys in the right position to get people out.
Your role on the recruiting front, obviously with the pitchers, I'm sure you'll have a major role, but you are really tied to the West Coast. You grew up in California, played in California, started cutting your teeth as a coach in California. On the 2024 A&M starting 9, I think 4 or 5 were Cali kids. And so how important is that connections for you to reignite those connections now for A&M on the recruiting front?
It's you've seen the SEC start to go west and do a good job over there. So I'm excited about that. And being from the West Coast and coaching on the West Coast the last 2 years, they were picking away some of the best players, with Grohovac especially, and you see guys kind of scattered all over this conference. But that's going to be a huge thing for me. I was a recruiting coordinator for 12, 13 years. So I have a lot of friends in this business, and it's funny when you get a job like this, how those friends start popping up again. And the guys that they weren't necessarily giving you their best are now going, hey, I've got this. So those relationships will definitely help. And Mike's got those relationships with guys out there too.
As a guy that's worked with Mike and then having gone against his offenses in a lot of inter squads, what can you say about what he does with hitters and what impresses you most about his offensive attack?
He's a wizard, and it's hard to put your thumb on what it is because when you watch him day to day, it looks very normal to what a normal hitting guy would be doing. But then when you hear the way he talks to them, when you see the game plan, you go, okay, this is in an elite level. They're going to be incredibly prepared, which most schools are. Can they execute that? And that's the difference with Mike's guys is they trust him, and if he says something, they're going to stick with it. And if it doesn't go their way, they can come back to the dugout and go, hey, that just because it didn't go your way on that at bat doesn't mean it's not going to go your way the next at bat. So let's maybe adjust the plan a little bit. So his relationship with them in that regard is what I think, and the trust is what sets him apart. Preparing for them, they're not going to chase and they're going to swing at strikes. That's obviously what he's done is such a good job here. So you've got to throw strikes. And when you throw strikes to guys like Jace and Gavin, and you're going to get yourself in some trouble. So it'll be fun to manage that lineup in the fall.
Go back with me with probably 3 or 4 weeks now. A&M's playing a Pac-12 school in a super regional. It's broadcast on ESPN. The atmosphere here, I've been covering games I played at McNeese, but I've been covering games at Bluebell Park now for almost a decade. It sounded like Kyle Field, and you'll get your introduction to all that. I'm sure here in a couple of months or about a month now. But when you're watching that series, did you get to watch any of it? And did you go, man, that atmosphere looks like it'd be pretty cool to coach in?
Yeah, I watch a lot of baseball. I'm a baseball junkie in that regard. I watch Major League Baseball, I watch college baseball, and especially my friends. And with the Oregon guys being, obviously in our conference, and then getting to watch Mike and those guys, it was something I was glued to, and it was. The Oregon team because you've played them twice. You know how they're trying to match up. You're watching A&M try and match up a little bit too and going, I don't know if this is a good matchup for this guy, and then he doubles and you're just, you're kind of playing coach along with it. But yeah, the place was rocking and I talked to Mike afterwards just briefly and he's like, I've never heard it like that. The place the last month has just been out of control and a definite advantage for the run that they went on. So that part of it is probably the most exciting thing for our family is to see the support that this place gets.
Well, I'm just going to tell you this, dude. You're walking into a fan base, a baseball fan base that's never been more motivated, never been more fired up, and obviously because of the way things transpired, but also, this is a club, and this is, I think, you mentioned this. They're a run away, 2 runs away from winning a national championship, and you wanted to get back to a place where competing in this league with a program that can do that. So where is your excitement level to walk into a first team meeting where you don't know anybody but there is a lot of familiarity there?
Yeah, I'm excited to, if we could start practice today, I would do it. Like, I'm ready to go. I want to put the recruiting stuff away and I want to get to work. So excited is an understatement, and things have been going so fast the last week that I haven't really had a chance to sit down. I don't even have a computer yet, so my life's just kind of in a blender. Yeah. But the excitement and I want to get the house sold in Seattle and get down here and get settled so we can really get focused, and then the excitement for football and kind of coming into all that stuff and the recruiting on-campus visits. Like, I just can't wait to see how this place operates.
Well, Coach, welcome to Aggie Land. We hope you're here for a long time. and we'll be talking to you between now and first pitch on opening day quite a bit. But I just wanted thank you for your time. I know you're busy flying off to the Cape today to do some more scouting and that kind of stuff. So thank you for your time. Welcome to Aggie Land, and congratulations.
My pleasure. Excited to be here and anytime.
And Broniger with Jason Kelly, associate head baseball coach and pitching coach at Texas A&M. So I really like that interview. If you want to hear from Will Fox and Caleb Longley, as well as rewatch that Jason Kelly interview, head over to TexAgs.com and check that out. We'll hit a break. On the other side, we'll hear from Luke and Carson a little bit more before we get to Caroline Fenton on the Boss Firearms Hotline. So don't go anywhere. It's TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. David doesn't even need to be here to spark the LeBron versus Jordan debate. Welcome in TexAgs Radio here, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Nick Savage filling in for David Nuno. And my partners here today, Luke Evangelos and Carson Stein, have kicked the hornet's nest. Carson, you got a few text messages you'd like to read?
I got one in particular I would really like to read. From John in Cyprus says, anyone who says LeBron is the GOAT loses all credibility. He plays in the WWE with no rules and no one plays defense. Look at the average scores, padded stats, huge asterisks.
Okay. And Luke, I know you and Carson are on the same page on this debate with LeBron and Jordan. I would be more partial to Jordan, but again, I'm like the most casual of all NBA fans here, so I'm not even going to comment or try to argue with y'all. So again, what is your take on that?
My take on this,
and that wasn't the only text, by the way, about about y'all being wrong about LeBron.
Yeah, look, this is not. Let's be civil here, and let me just say that if anybody was stat padding, it was Jordan, because the evidence is out there that his rebounding numbers, his steals numbers were being inflated at home. That is clearly documented. And what Jordan's era, sure, it was tougher, more defense, fouls were given less commonly. What that era lacks in, LeBron is obviously, it's a softer league, you could say that. LeBron's era is the most talented era of the NBA we've ever seen, so he's doing it against people who are way more talented. You hear the phrase, like, Jordan was playing against plumbers. I think that's, obviously they weren't plumbers, but if you put, the average NBA player in the 80s up against the average player now, it's going to be a result that a lot of the LeBron haters don't want to hear. So I think this whole debate is crazy. I am on the wavelength of let's just appreciate greatness as we see it. LeBron is one of, if not the greatest player that's ever played in the NBA. In my opinion, he is the greatest. But to say that him and Jordan, Jordan is light years better or LeBron is light years better is crazy. The stat padding, the soft league, sure, fouls are called differently in the NBA now than they were a long time ago, but this era is way more skilled than Jordan's era, and that's kind of where these two eras even out.
Carson, I would assume you're in agreement there?
I do, and I have something to add on. Why are we complaining that he's not playing in a league where guys are fighting, punching, throwing each other down on a nightly basis? Why is that a problem? I don't understand that take. When people say this league's not tough, who cares if it's tough? It's more skilled. Steph Curry's doing things that we've never seen basketball players do. Steph Curry changed the game of basketball, and then LeBron has just added on to everything that the game needs. In my opinion, he's the greatest player to ever walk the earth. Hot take. Not hot take, but
that's crazy, because there's hundreds of players that haven't even been born yet that will play in the NBA, and you're ready to say that LeBron
currently
is better than all of them?
Let me say that.
Okay.
As of right now, as a Spurs fan, Victor Wembanyama's coming for it.
All right.
As of right now, it's LeBron James. And like you said, Luke, it's not light years ahead of each other. There's an argument to be made, but in my opinion, LeBron's the greatest player to play basketball.
All right. I think that's enough NBA talk for the day. We've hit our quota. I didn't expect this coming today. We hit our quota with soccer talk and basketball talk, or NBA talk. There's nothing wrong with basketball talk, but NBA talk is a different story. So, again, I'm glad. The texts are rolling in. You got to deal with that on your own, Carson. I'll leave you for that. But I guess we'll hit a break here, and on the other side, we'll get to Caroline Fenton of Yahoo Sports, catch up with her, talk a little SEC Media Days, SEC football, all that good stuff. Keep it right here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Boy, Carson and Luke, man, they done kicked the hornet's nest, and they are coming after y'all on the text line. Welcome into TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and we're going to go out to the Boss Firearms Hotline. Boss Firearms, your local experts. They buy used guns, ammo, and accessories. Go to bossfirearms.com to earn money like a boss today. We're going to talk to Yahoo Sports host Caroline Fenton. Caroline, first of all, before we get into anything, what I was just referencing, I got two guys helping me out with the show today, and they have made our folks watching the show really mad today because they think LeBron is better than Jordan. And I'm not asking you to give your take, but boy, there are people coming after them for that.
Yeah, I was listening in to the last segment, and I was like, man, I hope Nick doesn't ask me about about the LeBron MJ debate. I mean, the answer is clear. It's Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time. But this is a great way to poke the bear.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the great debates of sports, and it's not going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. I accidentally poked the bear on Tuesday when I hosted. I'm not going to rehash the subject. We're moving on.
Pineapple on pizza, another great one to get the people going. Gift versus GIF, another great one.
Exactly.
MJ versus LeBron, one of the great debates, not just in sports, but in life.
Absolutely. So, Caroline, kind of update me and the audience what you're doing now. You're at Yahoo Sports, new gig there.
Yeah.
So what exactly are you doing? Where can people find you? Congrats, by the way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a new gig. I'm in my third week at Yahoo Sports. So right now, just kind of ramping up for the college football season. I'm hosting shows across the Yahoo Sports network. So you can find me on sports.yahoo.com, Yahoo Sports socials, your preferred podcast platform, Yahoo Sports YouTube. So I'll be hosting a daily podcast with Yahoo, and then I'll be doing live shows throughout the college football season. So I'll kind of be covering everything, dipping my toes in the water with NBA, MLB, NFL, but specifically honing in on college football. That'll be my bread and butter.
Awesome. And are you still up in Nashville?
I'm in Nashville. Yes,
Cool.
Sticking in Nashville. So I've been doing, just for anybody that doesn't know me, I've been doing local sports talk radio in Nashville the last 3 years before moving on to Yahoo Sports. So yeah, I'll be staying in Nashville. But we'll be
Awesome.
in Dallas next week. So be
Oh,
at
you are
least
coming.
close to your neck of the woods. I will be there.
Good.
Yes.
Because the last
Very,
time
very
I talked to you,
excited.
you said you didn't know if you're going to make it. So sweet. We'll catch
Kind
up
of
to
50-50. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see y'all next week.
Awesome. So let's talk about it. SEC Media Days. What storylines are you excited to follow? What do you think is going to be the big headline coming out of it next week?
There's always, though, that one question or the couple of questions that kind of become the biggest talking point. I remember, in 2022, it was who's the third best team in the SEC, making the assumption that the two best were Georgia and Alabama. We learned that making the assumption that Alabama would be one of the best two teams in the SEC was an incorrect one. So this year, I think it could be around two different things. Obviously, Texas and OU entering the SEC, which I know it's still a point of contention for those in Aggie Nation. I think one question that I'm intrigued to get people's kind of thoughts on is, does the SEC have to get prepared for Texas and Oklahoma? Or does Texas and Oklahoma have to get prepared for the SEC? Because I believe that Texas is one of the best two teams in the SEC as of today, July 11th. But there are also a few factors here that maybe that's too big of an assumption. Texas had one of the worst secondaries in college football last year. I think they were ranked 113th. Like, they were just getting teams were throwing the ball around the yard on Texas, but Texas was so good up front, and the Big 12 was such a heavy running conference last year that Texas could get by with stopping the run and letting teams pass all over them. I don't think that they can do that necessarily in the SEC. You're going to have to bolster up the secondary in addition to replacing Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat up front. That's not something that's easy to do. They're going to have to replace Bo Davis, their former defensive line coach who made his way to LSU. He's one of the best defensive line coaches in all of college football. That's not a coach that you can replace very easily. So are there more flaws to Texas than we might think, or is all of the talent and the players that they add in the transfer portal, Isaiah Bond, Amari Nyblack from Alabama, is that enough to propel them to an 11-1 or 10-2 season in the SEC, which I think would be enough to get them into the college football playoff? And then obviously a lot of questions about Oklahoma. So that's one thing that I'm looking forward to talking about. And then the other thing, is the quarterbacks. The quarterback situation in the SEC this year, I think, is really fascinating. Last year, we had a lot of new names and faces. I think Jaden Daniels was just kind of the de facto, quarterback to talk about last year because he was one of the few returning quarterbacks. Obviously, we turned out to be right when we talked about Jaden Daniels in that light. But this year, I believe it's right down the middle. 8 returning quarterbacks, 8 new quarterbacks, new starters at the quarterback position. So are one of these new starters maybe a Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, a Brock Vandegrift who transferred from Georgia to Kentucky, Blake Shapen at Mississippi State who's going to be taking over in that Jeff Lebby offense? Are those going to be those names going to steal the show, or is it going to be the quarterbacks that we're talking a lot about? Is it going to be Quinn Ewers? Is it going to be Carson Beck at Georgia? Is it going to be Jalen Milroe at Alabama, who, strangely enough, the quarterback at Alabama isn't getting as much talk as I feel like he should get, just given all the other changes at Alabama? Is it a Connor Wigman, who also isn't getting enough chatter? I think a lot of people forgot about Connor Wigman after his injury last year against Auburn. So the quarterback conversation, and of course the newcomers to the SEC, Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about, Texas and OU, Billy's made it a point on here, Bronny, another guest host we've had. It's about, not so much about Texas and OU playing the Georgia game or the big standout game on their schedule. Right. It's about, hey, guess what? Texas, you got to go to Vanderbilt, then play Florida, then you go to Arkansas. It's the week in and week out grind that I agree with you. I think is going to be the big test for those two new teams in the SEC. But looking at the conference, just like you said, what quarterbacks will stand out the most to you, or what at the end of the season, which quarterbacks will be like, hey, these are the brightest stars?
I think it's going to be one of the quarterbacks that we're not talking a lot about. And it's going to be probably one of the quarterbacks that is new to a starting role. We're talking a lot about Carson Beck. We're talking a lot about Quinn Ewers, even Jackson Dart as potential Heisman contenders, as first-round quarterbacks, first-round picks. And it's because they are veteran quarterbacks. We know who they are. They are established in their respective offenses. They have plenty of weapons to throw to, and they quarterback teams that we view as college football playoff contenders, and in Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck's case, national championship contenders. We're talking about them now. We're going to talk about them at SEC Media Days, and we're going to talk about them a lot throughout the regular season. I think what I'm most intrigued to see is who of that group that's maybe a little bit more unproven, who of that group that isn't really necessarily a household name becomes a household name. And it's also interesting, too, because we talk a lot about these new starters and these newcomers in the quarterback position in the SEC. Well, I think we're kind of familiar with a lot of them, right? Mm-hmm. We know Brock Vandegrift. He's been at Georgia for the last 2 to 3 years. We've come to know Nico Iamaleava because he was really the topic of conversation at Tennessee last year, more so than Joe Milton of when is it Nico time? Nico with his massive NIL deal. Garrett Nussmeier has been at LSU for the last 3 years. So these are all quarterbacks that have experience and have been there, even though they might be new to their respective programs or might be new to a starting role. So I think that any of those quarterbacks have the ability to make noise and make big splashes, even though it is their first year as starters. Whereas maybe with another first year starter, we wouldn't expect as much because they don't have as much name recognition or as much experience as some of these new starters have.
Talking to Caroline Fenton of Yahoo Sports on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Caroline, this has kind of been a topic all day. How many teams do you think the SEC gets into the expanded 12-team playoff, right? You get your auto bid with the conference champion, 7 up for grabs bids. It's kind of a math equation, but the 3 to 4, maybe 5. I don't know if that's possible, but how do you see that going down?
I think maximum is 5. So you get the 4 automatic bids from the 4 conference champions. Well, that takes up 4 spots, but one of those spots will be an automatic bid from the SEC. Mm-hmm. I think maximum 5, and you also have to ask the question, well, is a 9-3 SEC team a college football playoff team? Could be, depending on who that team beats, depending on who that team loses to. And can a 9-3 SEC team find itself in the SEC championship game? Mm-hmm. We saw that 2 years ago with LSU, and 9-3 in the regular season. They beat Alabama. That was enough to get them to the SEC championship. Could that team, find their way into the college football playoff, which would then push some other 11-1 or 10-2 SEC teams into the playoff? I think that a realistic number this year could be 4. And that's Georgia and that's Texas, who I expect to be, contenders for a national championship. Could Alabama find themselves in there in Kalen DeBoer's first year? Even though there's a lot of questions about Alabama, who's catching passes? Is the offensive line going to improve? There's still so much talent on that roster. And looking at Alabama's schedule, it's not a cakewalk, but it's also not a murderer's row. I could see Alabama potentially going 10-2 and finding themselves in the college football playoff. Is Ole Miss going to be able to put things together with all of the pieces that they took in the transfer portal? Can Lane Kiffin put all of these pieces together, all these little puzzle pieces, and make a beautiful picture at the end of the day? I think they absolutely can be in contention. I would say 5 is the maximum, but 4 is definitely a realistic number for the SEC this year. The question is, of all of these teams kind of in the mushy middle, of teams that we know are going to be good, how good can they be? I think Texas A&M falls into that category. I think Tennessee falls into that category. Alabama, LSU, teams we know will be good, but how good? Is it 9-3 good? 11-1 good? 7-5 good? That's the question.
Absolutely. Talking to Caroline Fenton of Yahoo Sports here on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Fun question that we've been pondering over nationally here is, with all this conference realignment coming into this season, which team in a new conference do you think has the best chance to win it? Utah's been a popular pick. That's my pick. Oregon up there. Texas has been discussed. So if you need a list, I got one because I needed it to track everybody. But what's your take on that?
I think that you just named the 3. Let's talk about the Big 12. I know that Brett Mark made some comments at Big 12 Media Day about the Big 12 being the deepest conference in college football. Everybody got their panties all in a wad about that. I mean, he's the Big 12 commissioner. Like, what do you expect him to say? I think Utah could come in and has the ability to win the Big 12. I also think there's like 5 or 6 other teams that are kind of right around there of maybe, 20 to 25 in the top 25, but could be, make noise in the Big 12. I think there's a lot of contenders in the Big 12. Looking at the Big 10, to me, it's really Ohio State and Oregon. Ohio State, they have one of the best transfer portal classes. They return a ton of talent. They return their coaching staff. Like, I think Ohio State absolutely is another national title contender, but Oregon is coming in and that train is rolling. So I think Oregon is the fair one, and then Texas in the SEC. Like, those feel like boring answers because I feel like those are the answers that everybody has, but those seem like the teams that are most poised to make a lot of noise in a conference and potentially win a conference just because of the talent on their team and the continuity on their coaching staffs. Like, I don't see Oklahoma being, equipped to win the SEC this year. I don't see like Arizona really being a team that could win the Big 12. Like, surely USC is not going to make a run in the Big 10. They're just teams that stand out to me as being really good fits or having things come together at the right time.
Talking to Caroline Fenton of Yahoo Sports here. Probably last question for you here, Caroline, then we'll let you get out of here. What do you think a successful season for A&M will look like this year under, year 1 under Mike Elko?
Ooh, that's a good question. And it's easy for me to
If
say
you
off
wanted
the
to
top
know,
of my
this
head
is
that
the
like
question.
8-4.
If you wanted to know, this is the question that got me in hot water with the listeners
Uh-oh.
with my answer.
That's
But
okay.
anyways.
You can ruffle some feathers, Nick. That's okay. It's your show, and you can let them know. It's easy for me to say like, oh, hey, 8-4 is a successful season in year 1. But looking at A&M's schedule ahead of me, Notre Dame. That's not an easy game to start with, even though you get the Fighting Irish at home. Welcome to Texas A&M, Mike Elko. Now you're playing Notre Dame. You play at Florida. That's not an easy place to play, especially because the Swamp isn't like a normal place for Texas A&M to play. Maybe teams that play Florida on a yearly basis, whether it's Tennessee or South Carolina, maybe they know what to expect from the Swamp. Texas A&M is new to the Swamp. Even though I don't think that Florida is going to be any sort of world beater, even though I do think Billy Napier is going into this season with his seat scorching hot, the Swamp is a force multiplier. You get Arkansas in Dallas. I don't think Arkansas is going to be that great of a team. I think that's a game that Texas A&M should win. Missouri. I expect Missouri to be another team that could, be in play for the SEC championship game. So just looking at the schedule, I think a successful season for Mike Elko win the games that you're supposed to win. Beat Arkansas, beat Bowling Green, beat McNeese. You should probably win at Auburn with all of the questions that Auburn has. You should win at South Carolina. Those are games that Texas A&M should be expected to win. And I think if Mike Elko is able to steal a game that's a little bit more of a toss-up, or a game that we view as a game that Texas A&M shouldn't win, I think that's successful. Beat the teams you should beat, add another one in there, and I think that Aggie fans can feel good moving forward.
Absolutely. Caroline, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And again, we'll catch up with you here in about a week.
Awesome. Appreciate it, y'all. Have a good one.
That's Caroline Fenton on the Boss Firearms hotline of Yahoo Sports. We'll hit a quick break. And on the other side, we'll wrap things up here on a Thursday edition of TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner Jewelers. Closing out the Thursday edition of TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner Jewelers. We're here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Quick 2-minute segment here to wrap things up. We're going to go over to the Angry Elephant News and Social Center. Carson Stein is over there. Carson, what do you got for us?
I got a somewhat decent news coming in from EA College Football 25 releasing next week. Yesterday, they released their top 100 players, rankings, and ratings, and the only Aggie to make it is Nick Scorton, coming in as the 88th overall best player at a 90 overall. So
I think
kind of wish Nick Scorton kind of wish Shamar Turner or Torin York would have made it, but
in a weird way, I hope that, that coming out, lights a little fire under everybody. Say, hey, no, I'm better than that. And the next year, college football 26, there's a lot of Aggies in it. I think that's very possible to happen. So thank you, Carson, all day for helping me out and making everybody mad. I appreciate that.
That's what I'm here for.
Luke, what do you got planned for tomorrow's show?
It's kind of top secret at the moment, but I will share that, we've been looking a lot at SEC. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to take a look at other conferences with realignment. A lot of different discussions to be had across the Big 10, ACC, and Big 12. So Matthew and I will be taking a look at those conferences and bringing in some youthful experts on the topic.
Youthful experts. Love it. Don't know. I can get by with like 3 hours of Luke. I'd be fine with that. 3 hours of Matthew Dawson. My goodness, that'll be something. Thank y'all so much for tuning in today. Keep it right here on the Zone 1150 Louis Bellina Show on the other side. Luke and Matthew here in the host chairs tomorrow. We'll see you mañana.